At 1:47 in the morning, my security tablet vibrated beside my bed. I opened the camera feed and felt my blood turn cold. My daughter stood outside my warehouse holding a flashlight, while her husband forced the lock. "Hurry up," she whispered, scanning the driveway. "What if he wakes up?" Her husband laughed from the darkness. "Your father spent 40 years protecting banks," he said. "Now he's an old man guarding money he'll never live long enough to spend." I sat frozen, listening to my daughter answer, "Find the documents before he hears us." I'm truly grateful you're here for this one. Before we begin, drop a comment for me. What's the weather like where you are right now? Your words in the comments matter more than you might realize. A quick note, some details in this story are fictionalized to strengthen the lesson. What matters most is the truth it reveals. The lock on my warehouse has been tampered with 3 times in 14 days, and this morning, I am watching the man who is going to try to take everything I own, drink coffee in my kitchen like we are family. At 68, I sit on my porch overlooking Lake Geneva with my coffee going cold, watching the warehouse lock tampered with for the 3rd time in 2 weeks. I spent 40 years as a federal bank security systems engineer, designing the very systems now being tested in my own backyard. November air bites through my flannel shirt, but I do not move. Cold keeps you sharp. The padlock gleams dull silver in early light, fresh scratches around the keyhole catching the sun. Someone tried again last night. Always at night. Always when they think I am asleep. I sip coffee that tastes like metal and regret. The lake spreads out gray water, reflecting gray sky. Across the yard, 60 feet away, the warehouse squats like a guilty secret. Weathered wood, corrugated metal roof. Inside is everything that matters: family trust, documents my late wife Celestine's jewelry, 40 years of patent paperwork for security systems. Banks still use financial records proving what I own. The scratches tell me someone wants what is inside. I do not investigate. I observe, calculate, and wait. After the first tampering 2 weeks ago, I installed cameras. Not obvious ones that scream surveillance. The kind I designed for federal banks, the kind that look like shadows in the eaves, with infrared for night recording and motion sensors calibrated to ignore raccoons, but capture human movement. The red indicator light blinks once every 8 seconds. If you do not know what you are looking for, it is just another shadow. 14 days of evidence. Not for a family argument, for a legal conviction. 3 times, I say aloud. Always at night. Always when they think I'm asleep. The camera captured it all. Timestamp 11:42 p.m. October 28th. Timestamp 1:15 a.m. November 2nd. Timestamp 2:33 a.m. November 7th. Each time the same careful approach, testing the lock, retreating when they cannot open it without noise. I spent 4 decades building systems to catch people who think they are smarter than locks. This one is not even trying to hide it. You would think a man who spent 40 years catching thieves would panic when someone tests his locks. You would be wrong. Panic is what amateurs do when they lose control. I have not lost control in 4 decades. I adjust my strategy and wait for the subject to commit enough for prosecution. The sun climbs higher, burning off fog. Later today, the man casing my property will arrive at my door with concern in his voice and calculation in his eyes, and I will pour him tea and watch him work. Keaton Riker arrives at 2:15 p.m. with a casserole still warm from someone else's oven. He is 41, my son-in-law who married my daughter Brielle 6 years ago, the kind of man who checks your medicine cabinet while asking about your health and measures your worth by square footage. Alaric. "I brought you something," he says, holding up the dish with that easy smile. "Brielle worries about you out here alone. This place is so isolated. What if something happened I like the quiet, I say, stepping back. Always have. The lake keeps me company. He follows me to the kitchen. I put the kettle on. Through the window above the sink, I can see the warehouse. Keaton can see it too. His eyes flick toward it away, then back like a moth testing a flame. Still a man your age. He continues setting the casserole down. Maybe something closer to town. Assisted living is not what it used to be. Climate-controlled activities, medical staff on site. I pour hot water over tea bags, watching color bleed out like truth in interrogation. I am not ready for assisted living. I still drive. I still think. I still know what day it is. Of course, of course. He laughs, rehearsed. I just mean planning ahead, being practical. While I finish preparing tea, his eyes sweep my study through the doorway. I watch him in the window's reflection, cataloging everything: drawer edges, desk papers, bookshelf gaps, the small safe in the corner. He moves through my home like a realtor appraising property, except realtors ask permission first. How is Brielle? I ask, handing him a mug. "Oh, good, good. Busy with work." He sips tea, gaze still wandering. She wanted to come today, but she had that meeting in Madison. We sit in the living room. He asks about my health, my finances, whether I need help with bills or paperwork. His concern is so carefully performed, it almost sounds genuine. I answer with the right amount of elderly vagueness, letting him think what he wants. He stays exactly 47 minutes, long enough to seem caring, not long enough to seem suspicious. When his car disappears down the gravel drive, tires crunching on frost-dead leaves, I open my laptop and pull up the camera feed. I scroll back to 2:43 p.m. after Keaton left the house, but before his car started. There he is. Timestamp 2:43 p.m. Keaton Riker standing by the warehouse door, phone raised, taking 3 careful photographs. The lock mechanism from 2 angles, the hinges, the warning sign about private property. He takes his time capturing every detail. He was not visiting a senile old man. He was casing a target. I watched the footage 3 times, memorizing every movement, every angle, the way he checked over his shoulder before photographing the hinges. This is not curiosity. This is reconnaissance for something bigger, something planned, something requiring knowledge of exactly how my warehouse locks and where the weak points are. I close the laptop and look out at the lake. The water has gone dark, with approaching evening, the warehouse sitting silent across the yard. Somewhere in Madison, my daughter Brielle is finishing her meeting. Somewhere in his car, Keaton reviews the photographs. Somewhere in the next few days, whoever has been tampering with that lock at night will try again. And 3 days later, at 1:47 in the morning, I would discover exactly who was helping him do it. At 1:47 in the morning, 3 days after I watched Keaton photograph my warehouse, my tablet vibrated on the nightstand with a motion alert. I reached for it in the darkness, and in the cold glow of that screen, I watched my daughter stand guard while her husband broke into my warehouse. The camera feed showed 2 figures. Inside the warehouse, Keaton moved through the basement section, with a flashlight sweeping the beam across storage boxes and file cabinets. Outside, the back door, illuminated by pale moonlight and the glow of her own flashlight pointed at the ground, stood my daughter Brielle, 38 years old, a part-time elementary school teacher who once cried when she accidentally stepped on a spider. She was watching the driveway, scanning left and right every few seconds, standing guard for a crime. I lay motionless in my bed, gripping the tablet so hard, my knuckles went white. The November cold had crept into my bedroom despite the heating, and I could see my breath in the darkness, but I felt nothing except the weight of understanding settling into my chest, like a stone dropping into deep water. Brielle, my daughter, the girl I taught to ride a bike on that gravel road. standing in the moonlight at 1:47 in the morning, letting him do this. Not just allowing it, helping. She chose a side, and it was not mine. On the screen, Keaton pulled a file box from the shelf and opened it. His flashlight beam revealing the contents. He was methodical, careful, photographing documents with his phone before replacing them exactly as he found them. This was not random searching. This was targeted reconnaissance. He knew what he was looking for. Outside, Brielle shifted her weight from foot to foot against the cold, pulling her coat tighter. She checked her phone, checked the driveway again. She was nervous but committed. There is a particular kind of pain that comes from watching someone you raised choose to hurt you. It does not burn. It freezes. It turns your blood to something thicker and colder than water ever was. I felt that ice spreading through my chest into my arms, down into my fingertips, still gripping the tablet. I could walk out there right now. I could shout. I could call the sheriff and have them both arrested for breaking and entering. I could end this in the next 5 minutes. But then what? A family argument. She said about who had permission to be in the warehouse. Keaton would claim I gave him access weeks ago and forgot. Brielle would cry and say they were worried about me. The sheriff would see an old man and his confused family, not criminals and evidence. If I moved now, I lost control of how this ended. I watched the feed for 18 minutes. Keaton searched 3 file boxes, photographed perhaps 20 documents, replaced everything carefully. At 2:05 a.m., he emerged from the warehouse and Brielle immediately killed her flashlight. They stood together for a moment in the darkness, and I saw him put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him. Then they walked together back toward the front of the property, back to wherever they had parked out of camera range. I set the tablet down. I stared at the ceiling. I did not sleep. At 7 a.m. Friday morning, I sat at my kitchen table with black coffee that tasted like ash and copper. The lake spread out before me through the window, gray water under gray November sky, and I saw nothing. My reflection in the window glass looked like a stranger. I picked up my phone and called Odessa Quinn. She answered on the second ring, with the clipped efficiency of an attorney who had spent 4 decades turning chaos into ironclad contracts. Odessa was 62, the trust and estate lawyer my late wife Celestine had trusted with our family's legal future, in ways I was only beginning to understand. "Alaric at 7 in the morning, she said, but her voice was alert. "What's wrong?" "Hypothetical question," I said. "If someone were building a case to declare me incompetent, how much time would I have before they could file with the court?" Silence on the other end. "Then, 2 months if they have medical documentation supporting cognitive decline. Less if they claim immediate danger to self or others." "Why are you asking me this at 7 in the morning, Alaric?" "Just a hypothetical," I said. "Thank you." I hung up before she could ask more questions. 2 months. Maybe less. You might wonder why I did not walk out there. Why I did not call the police right then, with the footage still on my tablet, with the evidence right in front of me. Here is what 40 years of catching thieves teaches you: the crime you can see is not the one you prosecute. You prosecute the one you can prove. And right now, all I had was footage of Keaton in a warehouse on property I owned with a daughter who could claim she thought he had permission. That was not enough. What I needed was a pattern. Documentation. Evidence of intent and conspiracy. I needed them to commit fully to reveal what they were really after, to make moves they could not take back or explain away as misunderstanding. I needed to let them think they were winning while I built something unbreakable. I opened the leather notebook Celestine had given me on our 40th anniversary. I had never used it. The pages were still crisp, still smelled like new paper and possibility. I uncapped my pen and wrote 4 words at the top of the first page. Evidence log. Warehouse intrusions. Below that, I wrote the date, the time. 3 names: Keaton Riker, Brielle, Boone, Riker, unknown associates. Then I wrote one sentence that Celestine would have recognized immediately, because she had heard me say it 1,000 times when I came home from work, designing security systems for federal banks. They always make the same mistake. They think the security system is the lock. It's not. The security system is the person watching. I had 2 months to build something perfect. 2 months to use 40 years of expertise not to confront my daughter, but to architect a legal trap so precise that when it closed, no one could claim it was anything but justice. I took a sip of cold coffee and began writing the details of last night's intrusion. But I did not know yet that Keaton had already made his first move against me, and it was happening in a doctor's office 40 miles away. 1 week into building my case, I found myself sitting across from Dr. Mira Ellison's desk, while she asked me to count backward from 100 by 7s, a cognitive test I had not requested, scheduled by my son-in-law with paperwork, describing me as increasingly confused and unable to manage daily affairs. I drove to the appointment because curiosity is stronger than pride. I wanted to see what Keaton was building. Dr. Mira Ellison, 50 years old, sat across her desk with the posture of someone who had spent 30 years telling patients uncomfortable truths, a general practitioner in Lake Geneva, who looked at me over her clipboard and said we would start with basic questions. "Mr. Boone, can you tell me what day of the week it is and what you had for breakfast?" "Friday," I said. "Black coffee and 2 eggs scrambled. And before you ask, yes, I took my blood pressure medication at 6:30 this morning, same as I have every morning for 8 years." She made a note. "Count backward from 100 by 7s, please. Now 100, 93, 86, 79, 72. That's fine." Another note. She continued through the full battery. Memory recall. Spatial reasoning. Drawing a clock showing 10 past 11. Naming the current president. Reciting my home address, my daughter's birthday, the year I retired. I answered everything correctly, because I am not incompetent, not confused, not declining. "Mr. Boone, you scored in the top percentile for your age group," Dr. Ellison said after 25 minutes. "Your recall is perfect, your reasoning is sound, and you show absolutely no signs of cognitive decline." "I could have told you that," I said. I'm sure you could have." She glanced at the doorway, then lowered her voice. "Your son-in-law is in the waiting room. He brought paperwork claiming you've been forgetting appointments, getting lost while driving, showing signs of confusion. None of that matches what I just observed." The door opened. Keaton entered with his concerned family member expression. "How did the tests go, doctor?" he asked, not looking at me. "Mr. Riker, your father-in-law's cognitive function is excellent," Dr. Ellison said. "There's no basis for any incompetency evaluation." Keaton's smile tightened. "Surely there must be some indication of decline. He lives alone in that isolated house. He forgets appointments." "He didn't forget this appointment, Mr. Riker. You made it without telling him. And his cognitive function is sharper than most of my patients half his age. But the paperwork I submitted, Dake, is full of fabrications." Dr. Ellison said, her voice cool. "I won't sign fraudulent documents. This evaluation is complete." Keaton looked at me for the first time. I kept my expression neutral, elderly, harmless. Inside, I was filing away every micro-expression, the tightening around his eyes, the jaw clenched, the calculation behind his facade. "I see," he said finally. "Thank you for your time, doctor." He left. Through the window, I watched him pace the parking lot, phone pressed to his ear, gestures sharp and angry. Dr. Ellison didn't know she had just become the first soldier in a war she could not see. Keaton needed a doctor's signature. She refused. He would not stop. He would find another doctor, one less principled, one more desperate for the consultation fee. "Mr. Boone," Dr. Ellison said quietly, "whatever your son-in-law is trying to do, it won't involve a medical diagnosis from this office. Be careful." I thanked her and drove home through November drizzle that made the lake look like hammered pewter. That evening, Brielle arrived unannounced. "Dad," she said at the door, her smile warm and concerned. "You look so tired lately. Are you sleeping okay? I brought some chamomile tea. It always helped when I was stressed teaching." "That's thoughtful, sweetheart," I said, stepping back. "I appreciate you checking on me." She moved into the kitchen with the ease of someone who had grown up in this house. I stood in the doorway watching as she filled the kettle, pulled 2 mugs from the cabinet-arranged tea bags. Then she reached into her purse. The motion was quick, casual, but I caught it. A small bottle. White powder tapped into my mug. Not sugar, the motion was too careful, too deliberate, her eyes flicking to make sure I was not watching. "Hi there," she said, pouring hot water. "This should help you sleep better." We sat at the kitchen table. She talked about her students, about lesson plans, about the weather turning cold. Normal daughter visiting normal father. She hugged me for 15 seconds before she left, longer than usual. Was that guilt? Or was she counting in her head, waiting to see if the pills would take effect? Did Keaton tell her to stay long enough to be sure I drank it? After her taillights disappeared, I poured the tea down the sink. I retrieved the chemical test kit from my basement workshop, the one from my security consulting days. The residue tested positive for benzodiazepine, a mild sleeping sedative. Not enough to harm, just enough to make someone drowsy, confused, easier to dismiss as declining. There is a specific kind of grief that comes from watching your child poison you. Not with intent to kill, that would almost be cleaner. But poison designed to make you slower, foggier, easier to dismiss when you try to defend yourself. Poison that looks like love wrapped in chamomile tea and concerned smiles. I did not feel rage. I felt sadness so deep it had weight settling into my bones like winter cold. I made a cold calculation: from tonight forward, I would pretend to drink the tea. Let them think the pills were working. Let them believe I was becoming easier to control while I documented every poisoned cup. 3 nights later, she brought more tea. I tested it. Same result. I logged it in my evidence notebook with clinical precision: date, time, substance, detected, witness present. But as I wrote Brielle's name in handwriting that matched the birthday card still on my refrigerator, my pen hesitated. Because tomorrow I had to drive to Madison to see Odessa Quinn. And tomorrow I would learn that my late wife, Celestine, had known about Keaton long before I did. And what Celestine had done about it would change everything. I found my wife's warning letter in the basement, where Keaton's search had displaced it by 3 millimeters. And when I broke the seal, I had been too grief-stricken to open for 4 years. Celestine's handwriting told me she had known Keaton was a threat 8 months before she died. The day after I discovered Brielle's sleeping pills, I descended to the basement to inventory what Keaton had searched during his 1:47 a.m. break-in. My security systems kept meticulous records, not just camera footage but motion sensor logs that tracked every step, every object touched, every drawer opened. Behind the bookshelves on the hidden shelf, only Celestine and I knew about an old envelope had moved exactly 3 millimeters from its original position. I measured it twice to be sure. Someone had pulled it out, examined it, replaced it carefully, but not perfectly. The envelope was yellowed with age, my name written in Celestine's precise handwriting across the front. She had left it 4 years ago before the cancer took her, with instructions I should open it when I was ready. I had never been ready. Grief is not something you schedule. I broke the seal with shaking hands. "My love," the letter began. "If you are reading this and Keaton is still in our lives, you are in danger. I have seen things in him that he hides from Brielle. I have asked Odessa to arrange everything. Trust her. Trust the plan I couldn't tell you about because you would have tried to stop me from protecting you. I sat on the basement floor, concrete cold through my jeans, and read the rest. Celestine wrote about small things she had noticed, the way Keaton asked too many questions about our finances, the casual inquiries about my health that felt like reconnaissance, the comments about how isolated the cabin was, how difficult it would be if something happened to me. She wrote about catching him photographing documents in my study during a family dinner, claiming he wanted to remember Brielle's childhood home, but his camera was pointed at the desk, not the photos on the wall. I know you, Alaric, she wrote. You will want to confront him to give him a chance to explain because you believe in redemption. But some people are only pretending to be redeemable while they calculate how much you're worth. The letter was dated 8 months before her death. March 2018. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She had been dying when she wrote this, and she had used those final months to build armor around me instead of raging against what was coming. I met with Odessa last Tuesday. The letter continued. You thought I was at the garden club. I'm sorry I lied. But if I told you what I was arranging, you would have argued that we should give him more time, more chances, more rope. I love that about you. But this time I need you to trust that I saw clearly what you couldn't bear to see. Celestine had been stage 4 when she wrote this letter. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, the kind with a timeline measured in months, not years. And she had used those months to build armor around me instead of spending every moment we had left just being together. She had looked at the man who would destroy me and decided her last act would be protection. I folded the letter with hands that shook, placed it back in the envelope, and climbed the basement stairs, feeling like I was carrying the weight of her love up from underground. The next morning, I walked to the lakeside between my property and the neighbors. Ingrid Vale, 71 years old, fed the birds by the lake every morning at dawn, the woman who had been Celestine's closest friend for 30 years, who remembered everything and said little until the right questions were finally asked. She stood at the water's edge, scattering seed for the geese her silver hair caught in the November wind. Ingrid, I said, and she turned. Alaric. She studied my face. You look like a man who found something he wasn't ready to find. I need to ask you something that might sound strange, I said. In the months before Celestine died, did she ever mention meeting with anyone, a lawyer maybe, or going somewhere alone? Ingrid stopped scattering seed. She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're finally asking the right questions, she said. I wondered when you would. What do you mean? It was a Tuesday in March 4 years ago, Ingrid said. She told you she was going to the garden club meeting. She went to Madison instead. I saw her leave with a folder under her arm. She came back 3 hours later, lighter. Not happy, she was too sick for happy by then, but lighter, like she'd finished something important. The geese honked and paddled closer, expecting more seed. Ingrid ignored them. She made me promise not to tell you unless you asked directly, Ingrid continued. She said, if Alaric asks about that Tuesday, tell him everything. If he doesn't ask, it means he doesn't need to know yet. You just asked Alaric. So I'm telling you, your wife spent her last months building something to protect you from someone she saw coming. Marriage, I thought, is not about knowing everything. It is about trusting that the person who knows you best will protect you even from threats you refuse to see. What was in the folder? I asked. I don't know, Ingrid said. But when she came home, she looked at me across the yard and she smiled. Not a sad smile, a satisfied one. Like a chess player who'd just made the move that would win the game 3 months from now. I thanked Ingrid and walked back to my cabin with heavier steps than I had arrived with. Ingrid's words echoed. Your wife spent her last months building something. Not writing a letter, not giving advice, building. That was Celestine's word for legal structures, for trusts and estates and foundations that would outlast the people who created them. I had Odessa Quinn's number in my phone, the attorney my dying wife had visited in secret with a folder 4 years ago. Tomorrow, I would drive to Madison and learn exactly what Celestine had built to protect me from a son-in-law she had recognized as a predator while I was still calling him family. And what she had built was going to change everything I thought I knew about the fight I was in. Odessa Quinn's law office occupied the top floor of a Madison brownstone where my dying wife had traveled alone 4 years ago. And when Odessa slid a leather-bound trust document across her mahogany desk with Celestine's signature on page 43, I understood that my wife had not just predicted the war, she had spent her final months stockpiling ammunition. The office smelled like old books and expensive coffee. Rain streaked the windows overlooking State Street, and I could hear the muted sound of traffic 4 floors below. Odessa sat across from me in her tailored gray suit, the same attorney who had answered my hypothetical question about incompetency timelines, without asking why. And now I understood that she had been waiting years for me to ask the real questions. Celestine walked into this office on a Tuesday in March 4 years ago, Odessa said. She had a folder, a bottle of water, and a list of 17 ways someone could try to steal from you. She said, "Odessa, I'm dying and I need to build something that works after I'm gone. My son-in-law is going to come for my husband, and Alaric won't see it coming because he believes in redemption." I stared at the trust document. The pages were crisp, formal, filled with legal language that would take hours to parse completely. But Odessa had marked 3 sections with yellow tabs. What did she build? I asked. The Celestine Boone Family Trust, Odessa said, worth $2.4 million. I blinked. That's not possible. We had savings, yes, but not your security system patents. Odessa interrupted. Your consulting contracts, the lakeside property, her jewelry collection. Everything consolidated into one legal entity with protections Celestine spent 8 months researching. She read estate law textbooks, Alaric. While you were driving her to chemotherapy appointments, she was studying how to make your assets legally untouchable. $2.4 million. I had known we were comfortable, that retirement was secure, but I had not realized Celestine had consolidated everything into a fortress worth more than most people would see in a lifetime. Why didn't she tell me? I asked. Because you would have argued, Odessa said simply. You would have said Keaton deserved a chance to prove himself. You would have wanted to give him time to change. Celestine knew you, Alaric. She knew your heart, and she loved you enough to protect you from it. Odessa flipped to page 17, the second yellow tab. This clause is the kill switch, she said. The moment Keaton files fraudulent incompetency paperwork attempts to access assets through false guardianship or commits elder abuse and, yes, drugging you with undisclosed sedatives, counts he triggers automatic disinheritance. Not just of the trust, Alaric. Of everything. Brielle's inheritance, too, if she's complicit. I read the clause 3 times. The language was precise, unambiguous, devastating. Any attempt to defraud abuse or falsely declare the truster incompetent would result in immediate and permanent disinheritance with all contested assets transferring to the Lake Geneva Elder Protection Fund charity. So every fake doctor's report Keaton tries to file destroys his inheritance rights. Odessa finished. Every forged signature, every fraudulent claim. He thinks he's building a case to control your money. He's actually building the legal documentation that proves he should never touch a cent of it. Celestine had written this trust while I drove her to chemotherapy appointments, while I held her hand through nausea, while I read her mystery novels in hospital chairs. I thought she was resting between treatments. She was building a legal fortress that would protect me for decades after her death. How did she know? I asked. What did she see in Keaton that I missed? Odessa opened a manila folder. Inside were photocopies of credit card statements, gambling website printouts, and handwritten notes in Celestine's precise script. She hired a private investigator, Odessa said. 3 months before she came to my office. Found evidence of gambling debts, suspicious financial transactions, patterns of deception. She didn't tell you because you would have confronted him, and confrontation gives people a chance to improve their lies. She wanted documentation, not drama. I looked at the papers. My wife, dying of cancer, had hired an investigator to protect me from the man I was inviting to family dinners. Celestine told me something the last time she was in this office, Odessa said quietly. She said Alaric will blame himself when this happens. He'll think he should have seen it coming. But predators choose their victims carefully. They choose people who believe in second chances, who trust family, who would rather be wrong about suspicion than right about betrayal. Tell him that's not weakness. That's just love. And I'm building this so his love doesn't destroy him. I sat back in the leather chair, the trust document heavy in my hands. Your wife built this knowing she wouldn't be here to enforce it, Odessa continued. She built it knowing you'd fight me on using it because you'd want to give them chances. But she also knew that when you finally accepted what they were, you'd need a weapon that couldn't miss. This is that weapon. Keaton has already lost. He just doesn't know it yet. Keaton thought he was hunting a wounded deer alone and confused in the woods. He did not know the deer had a rifle, and the rifle had been loaded by a woman who had spent 43 years watching her husband trust people who did not deserve it. I stood tucking the trust document copy into my briefcase. Thank you, I said, for helping her, for keeping this safe. Mom, she made me promise I wouldn't tell you unless you came asking, Odessa said. I'm glad you finally did. I walked out of her office carrying clarity I had not felt since Celestine died. I had the legal fortress. I had the evidence log. I had 2 months before Keaton could file his fraudulent incompetency case. But what I did not have yet was the full picture of how deep Keaton's desperation ran, how much debt was chasing him, or who else he had involved in his scheme. And in 3 days, a private investigator named Lucien Frost was going to walk into my life with a file that would show me exactly how much money Keaton owed and to whom. And one of those creditors was already making plans that involved my 8-year-old granddaughter. 3 days after learning about Celestine's trust, I sat across a desk buried in surveillance photos and financial records, while private investigator Lucien Frost told me my son-in-law owed $340,000 to the kind of people who do not take you to court. They take you to empty parking lots. Lucien Frost, 45 years old, sat behind a desk that looked like a crime scene evidence board, a private investigator who had spent 22 years following money trails and unfaithful spouses. His office in Milwaukee smelled like stale coffee and old paper. Rain drummed against the window behind him, and manila folders covered every surface. Mr. Boone, he said, sliding the first folder across the desk. I have been doing this for 22 years. I have seen gambling problems, embezzlement affairs. Usually it is 1, maybe 2 at once. Your son-in-law is running all 3 simultaneously, and the debt collectors are not the kind that send polite letters. These are the kind that show up at your workplace with suggestions about life insurance policies. I opened the folder. Bank statements, credit card bills, screenshots of online gambling sites. Lucien had traced everything with the precision of an accountant building a prosecution. $340,000 in gambling debts. Lucien continued tapping a spreadsheet. Spread across underground poker games, offshore betting sites, and 2 separate loan arrangements I would classify as predatory. He has been hemorrhaging money for at least 3 years. I flipped through the pages. The numbers were staggering, relentless, the kind of debt that crushes lives. That there is more, Lucian said. His former employer is investigating him for embezzlement. 87,000 in missing client funds. They have not pressed charges yet because they are still tracing where the money went. But they will. My estimate, he has got maybe 6 weeks before the DA gets involved. 6 weeks. That was Keaton's timeline. That was how long he had to get his hands on my assets before his world collapsed. Lucian slid another folder across. This is the part that surprised me. Wells Fargo account registered under the name of a woman who is not your daughter. Contains $23,000. I looked at the account statements. Regular deposits, small amounts, carefully timed. Does my daughter know this account exists? I asked. No, sir, Lucien said. Based on the transaction patterns, he has been moving money from their joint account in increments small enough that she would not notice. 200 here, 300 there. It adds up to 23,000 over 18 months. She is teaching elementary school thinking they are barely making rent. He is stockpiling an escape fund. Brielle did not know. My daughter was teaching 8-year-olds their multiplication tables, coming home to make poisoned tea for her father, all while her husband stole from her to fund a mistress and an escape plan that did not include her. She was not just a co-conspirator. She was another victim. But she had still made her choice. The embezzlement investigation is real, Lucian said. I verified it with a contact at his former firm. They have not pressed charges yet, but they will. That is his timeline, Mr. Boone. That is how long he has to get his hands on your assets before everything falls apart. I closed the folders and looked at Lucian. Good work, I said. Keep watching him. That weekend, Lucian's text arrived at 4:47 p.m. It contained 3 surveillance photos and a message that made my blood run cold. The first photo showed Keaton standing on his front porch in Madison, talking to a man carrying a medical briefcase. The timestamp read, Saturday, 2:15 p.m. The second photo showed them entering Keaton's house. The third showed the man leaving 43 minutes later without the briefcase. Lucian's text explained. Subject met with Gerald Pemberton, former CPA license revoked 2018 for medical document fraud. Pemberton carries no legitimate credentials but advertises evaluation services on dark web forums. Cash only. Meeting lasted 43 minutes. He left without the briefcase. I stared at the photos. Keaton was not waiting for Dr. Ellison to change her mind. He was not searching for another legitimate physician. He had hired a forger to manufacture the medical records he needed. I called Odessa Quinn. He hired someone to forge medical records, I said when she answered. I just got photos. The man's name is Pemberton, disbarred 3 years ago for exactly this. Keaton is not waiting for a legitimate diagnosis, he is manufacturing one. We need to move faster. Silence on the other end. Then, if those forged documents get filed first, even if we prove they are fake later, the court process gives him temporary control. He could drain accounts, sell property, all under emergency guardianship provisions, before we untangle the fraud. How much time do we have? Lucian says 6 weeks before Keaton's embezzlement charges hit, I said. He is going to move before then. We have a month, maybe less. And then we accelerate, Odessa said. I will file a preemptive competency validation with the court establishing your mental fitness on record before he can file his fraud. It is defensive, but it creates a paper trail. And Alaric document everything, every conversation, every visit, every cup of tea. When this goes to court, we need a timeline that is unbreakable. I hung up and looked at the surveillance photos spread across my kitchen table. Keaton's guilty posture, the forger's briefcase, the timestamps proving premeditation. You think catching criminals is about being smarter or faster. It is not. It is about being more patient than they are desperate. And Keaton had just run out of patience. I had evidence of fraud, embezzlement, theft from Brielle, and now document forgery. I had Celestine's trust with its automatic disinheritance clause. I had Odessa preparing defensive legal filings. I had 1 month to spring a trap that would catch them all. But what I did not have was the one piece that would make Keaton truly desperate enough to make a fatal mistake. I did not know yet about the loan shark named Mercer Crowe, who was tracking Keaton's every move. And I did not know that in 2 days, Brielle would receive an unmarked envelope containing a photograph that would force her to choose between protecting her daughter or protecting her husband. That photograph would be of Isolde's school. The unmarked envelope arrived at Brielle's Madison home on Wednesday afternoon, and when she opened it at her kitchen table, she found a photograph of her 8-year-old daughter, Isolde, walking out of Riverside Elementary School's front gate alone. No caption, no demand, just the silent message that someone knew where her child was every day at 3:15. I learned about it that evening when Lucian called. "Your daughter received mail today," he said. Unmarked envelope. She opened it on the porch, went inside, and has not left the house since. Keaton arrived home 3 hours ago. They have been arguing. Keep watching," I said. What I could not see through Lucian's surveillance, I could reconstruct from patterns Brielle crying at her kitchen table. The photo in her shaking hands. Keaton arriving home with practiced surprise and calculated comfort. Isolde, my 8-year-old granddaughter, with her mother's smile and her father's unfortunate timing, appeared first as a photograph in a threatening envelope, a bright-eyed child walking out of school, unaware that someone with a camera and bad intentions was turning her innocence into leverage. Mercer Crowe, 52 years old, never showed his face in person, but his presence arrived like a knife in an envelope, a loan shark, who operated legally enough to avoid prison, but viciously enough that his clients knew the cost of late payments was measured in more than just interest rates. The photo was his calling card, his reminder that debts come due and children walk predictable routes at predictable times. Lucian's follow-up text came at 11:47 p.m. Subject left house at 11:32. Driving directions suggests meeting, will follow. I did not sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with the evidence log open, adding new entries. Wednesday, unmarked envelope delivered to Brielle's residence. Contents threatening photograph of minor child. Intent coerce cooperation through maternal fear. There is no faster way to destroy someone's moral compass than to put their child in the crosshairs. Brielle was a school teacher who cried at sad movies, but show her a photo that suggests her daughter is being watched by violent men, and she will do things she never imagined herself capable of. Keaton knew this. Mercer Crowe knew this. And I knew this too. The next morning, Keaton's text arrived at 8:15 a.m. "Hey, Alaric water heater making that noise again. Mind if I come by today to check it? Should only take a couple hours." I replied, "Come around 3, I'll be here." The water heater worked perfectly. We both knew it. But Keaton needed an excuse to be in my house for extended periods, to search, to listen, to position himself for whatever he was planning next. He arrived at 3 p.m. with his toolbox and that easy smile that probably fooled most people. I let him in, offered coffee he did not drink, and watched him head to the basement. For an hour he made appropriate repair noises. Tools clanging. Water running. The performance of honest work. At 4:15 p.m., I picked up my phone and dialed my own voicemail, then held the phone loosely so my voice would carry through the walls. With a slight tremor I had practiced that morning, I spoke clearly enough to reach the kitchen. "Tuikai, yes, I need to withdraw my entire high-yield savings account." I said to nobody. The one I opened in 1999. Account number 4478-9923. I want the full balance. $500,000. Cash, hundreds. Have it ready tomorrow at 9 a.m. I paused, listening. The tool sounds from the basement had stopped. I do not care about early withdrawal penalties. I continued louder now. This is my money, my decision. And do not call my daughter about this. Brielle does not need to know. She would just tell Keaton, and he would have some scheme to get his hands on it. I am moving it somewhere safer, somewhere I can see it. Another pause. I heard it then, the creak of floorboards in the kitchen. Keaton had come upstairs. He was listening. 9 a.m. tomorrow, I said firmly. Fifth Third Bank downtown. I will be there when they open. I hung up the weather line and set the phone on the table. Lying to a liar requires more than just saying false words. It requires performing the vulnerability they expect to see. Becoming the confused old man they have already convinced themselves you are so completely that they forget you spent 40 years designing systems to catch people who think they are smarter than the cameras watching them. I heard the soft buzz of a phone sending a message. Keaton was texting someone. Brielle, most likely. Telling her the money exists. Telling her it is accessible. Telling her tomorrow morning their problems could be solved if they act fast enough. 2 minutes later, Keaton appeared in the living room doorway. All fixed, he said, his voice slightly breathless. Water heater should be good now. Thank you, I said. What do I owe you? Nothing, nothing, he said already, packing his toolbox with hurried movements. Family helps family, right? He was gone within 5 minutes. His goodbye rushed and distracted, already planning. I walked into the kitchen and looked at the water heater gauge through the basement door. He had not touched it. The temperature was exactly where it had been that morning. The trap was not set anymore. The trap was sprung. That night, Lucian's text arrived at 11:53 p.m., subject at Rosewood Bar, Route 14. Meeting unknown male, age 40 to 45. Conversation appears tense. Taking photos. I stared at the message. Keaton was recruiting help. Someone to open a safe that did not contain $500,000. Someone who would find himself arrested for attempting to steal from a trust protected by Celestine's ironclad legal fortress. I did not know yet that the man Keaton was approaching was named Garrick Thorne, a 41-year-old independent locksmith with a criminal record. I did not know that 20 years ago I had designed the security system that caught Garrick breaking into State Federal Bank. And I did not know that after his arrest, I had written a letter to the judge requesting leniency, arguing that a young man who made one terrible mistake deserved a chance at redemption, a letter that reduced his sentence from 8 years to 3. The past was about to walk back into my present, and neither of us would recognize each other until it was far too late. That same Friday night, while I sat at home believing my bait was working, Keaton walked into a bar 40 miles away where Garrick Thorne sat alone in a corner booth, a 58-year-old locksmith whose reformed life was about to collide with a criminal past. I knew better than anyone, because I was the one who designed the security system that caught him 20 years ago. I did not know about the meeting yet. Lucian would text me at 11:47 p.m. with 2 words that would unlock a file I had not opened since 2004. But at 11:32 p.m. when Keaton entered that bar, I was still at my cabin cataloging the evidence I had collected, believing the trap was proceeding according to plan. Garrick Thorne sat in the dark corner nursing a beer he barely touched, a locksmith who had spent 17 years building a legitimate life on top of a criminal past that included 3 years in prison for safe-cracking a past he thought was buried, until a desperate man walked through the door. Keaton slid into the booth across from him without asking permission. "You Garrick," Keaton said. "I was told you are the best locksmith in the area, specializing in difficult jobs." Garrick looked up from his beer. I work on houses and cars. Legal work. Licensed and bonded. I need someone who can open an old safe, Keaton said, leaning forward. 1940s model combination lock. My father-in-law does not remember the code, and we need to access some family documents inside. Simple job, good pay, no questions. I do not do that anymore, Garrick said, setting his beer down. I am a legitimate locksmith now. Find someone else. He started to stand. The safe might contain a significant amount of cash, Keaton said quickly. Maybe $500,000. The old man has been hoarding it for years, paranoid about banks. My wife deserves her inheritance now, not when he finally dies. Garrick stopped mid-motion, one hand on the table, not sitting, but not standing either. Not turning around, but not walking away. $500,000, he said quietly. You are sure? I heard him on the phone with his banker today, Keaton said. 500,000 in cash, withdrawing it tomorrow morning. But if we can get into that safe tonight before he moves it, my wife gets what should have been hers years ago. Garrick stood frozen for 3 seconds. Then he sat back down. I spent 3 years in prison for opening safes that were not mine, he said. I swore when I got out I would never touch another vault. Then think of this as a vault belonging to my wife, Keaton said. Her father, her inheritance. Legal gray area, not black. $30,000 for one night of work. 3 tables away, Lucian Frost sat with his phone positioned, like he was texting. But the camera was recording everything. Reformed criminals are not people who stopped wanting what they wanted before. They are people who built walls around those wants and spend every day maintaining those walls. Keaton had just found the crack in Garrick's wall, and the crack was shaped like $500,000. At 11:47 p.m., my phone buzzed with Lucian's text, Garrick Thorne, 2 words. But they carried the weight of 2 decades. I opened my laptop and pulled up my archived work files from the consulting firm. I typed the name into the search bar, and the database loaded a file I had not accessed since 2004. Garrick Thorne, age 38 in the mugshot. Arrested for breaking into State Federal Bank on a Sunday morning, using manipulation, drilling a technique where you listen to lock tumblers with a medical stethoscope. My security system caught him because I had installed vibration sensors designed specifically to detect that method. But there was another document in the file, a letter I had written to the sentencing judge. I opened it and read my own words from 20 years ago. Your Honor, I designed the security system that apprehended Mr. Thorne, and I am writing to request leniency in his sentencing. Mr. Thorne is a skilled craftsman who made a poor choice under financial pressure. The prosecution seeks 8 years. I believe 3 years will give him a realistic chance at rehabilitation, while 8 years will harden him into a career criminal. I recommend mercy not because his crime was minor, but because he has the capacity to be reformed if we give him that opportunity. Judge Hendricks had reduced the sentence to 3 years. Garrick served his time and disappeared into legitimate work. Until tonight, I stared at the mugshot on my screen. He looked younger, more desperate, less weathered. The man Keaton was recruiting in that bar 40 miles away had spent 17 years building a clean life on top of those 3 years I had helped minimize. I gave you a second chance, I said to the photo. I wrote that letter on a Tuesday afternoon. I argued to Celestine that you deserved mercy. She said I was too forgiving. I said that was the difference between justice and revenge. The house creaked in the November wind. The lake beyond my window was black glass. And now you are going to break into my warehouse, I continued, because my son-in-law offered you money to steal what belongs to my family. You want to know what it feels like to save someone's life, and then watch them use that saved life to try to destroy yours. It feels like justice running backward, like mercy being used as a weapon. Like every good impulse you ever had being turned into proof that kindness is just strategic stupidity. with better press. I closed the laptop and sat in darkness. Garrick Thorne did not know I existed as anything other than a paranoid old man with a safe. He did not know I was the reason he only served 3 years instead of 8. He did not know that when he agreed to Keaton's offer, and I knew he would agree, because desperate men always do, he would be walking into a trap designed by the same person who had designed the trap that caught him the first time. The irony was so perfect it felt scripted, but I was not the only one collecting evidence. I was not the only one documenting what was happening. And I did not know yet that my 8-year-old granddaughter Isolde had already created something I did not plan for, something that would arrive at my door within days. A painting. 2 people with flashlights standing in front of a warehouse. Because children, as I have learned, always draw exactly what they see. When my granddaughter Isolde arrived at the lakeside cabin that cold December morning with her mother Brielle, I expected the usual weekend visit filled with hot cocoa and board games, not the childish painting she handed me that would become one of my most valuable pieces of evidence. Isolde Riker, my 8-year-old granddaughter with her mother's auburn hair and a smile that could melt winter ice, was the innocent witness I never anticipated. She burst through my front door with the energy only children possess on winter mornings, her cheeks pink from cold, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. "Grandpa," she shouted, already pulling off her coat. "I made you something in art class." Brielle followed behind her, quieter, more careful. She had not looked me directly in the eye since she walked through the door. The sleeping pills were working their slow poison on her conscience. I could see it in the way she touched her daughter's shoulder, too often needing the physical reminder that some things were still innocent. "What did you make, sweetheart?" I asked, crouching down to Isolde's level. She pulled a rolled-up paper from her backpack, the kind of watercolor painting elementary schools do on thick construction paper. She unrolled it with the pride of a child who believes everything they create is a masterpiece. "It is from when Mommy and Daddy took me to see the big building at night," she said. The painting showed a lakeside scene, a small house on the left, a larger rectangular building on the right. And in front of that building, 2 stick figures holding what could only be flashlights drawn with careful yellow crayon to show the beams of light. My heart stopped. "What were Mommy and Daddy doing at this building, sweetheart?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "They were looking for something with their flashlights," Isolde said. "They said I had to wait in the car, but I could see them through the window. There were lots of boxes inside." Brielle went pale. "Isolde, honey, that was just... It looks like our warehouse," I said, looking at my daughter. "Does it not?" Brielle opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "She has a good imagination," Brielle said finally. "Kids see things and..." "I painted what I saw," Isolde insisted. "My teacher said artists paint truth." The painting showed 2 figures, one taller, one shorter, Brielle and Keaton, standing in front of my warehouse at night with flashlights exactly as they had appeared on my camera footage weeks ago when I watched them through a tablet screen at 1:47 a.m. I have spent 42 years in security systems engineering, designing protocols to catch sophisticated criminals who plan every detail of their deceptions. Yet here I sat, holding a child's painting crayon stick figures with oversized flashlights. And I realized that sometimes the most damning evidence comes not from elaborate surveillance or forensic accounting, but from the innocent observations of an 8-year-old girl who simply painted what she saw. "It is beautiful," I said to Isolde. "Can Grandpa keep it?" "Shh. Ikwan," she said. "I made it for you." Brielle stood frozen by the door, watching me tape her daughter's painting to my refrigerator, like it was any other piece of childhood art, not realizing I would photograph it in high resolution the moment she left Loggett, as Exhibit 7 in my evidence notebook, and show it to Odessa Quinn as proof that even children knew something criminal was happening at the warehouse. They stayed for hot cocoa. Isolde chattered about school, about her friends, about the snow that was supposed to come next week. Brielle sat at my kitchen table and said almost nothing, staring at her daughter's painting on my refrigerator with the expression of someone watching evidence accumulate against them in real time. When they left at noon, Brielle hugged me longer than usual. "I love you, Dad," she whispered. "I love you too," I said. And I meant it. That was the terrible part. I meant it. At 2:47 p.m., my phone rang. Odessa Quinn. "Alaric, we have a serious problem," she said without preamble. "Keaton tried to list your cabin for sale using fake guardianship papers." I sat down at my kitchen table. "Explain." "He contacted 3 real estate agencies over the past week, presented forged documents claiming he had legal authority to sell your property due to mental incompetence. One agent grew suspicious and called my office to verify. Keaton claimed you were mentally unfit to manage your assets. He is moving faster than I anticipated," I said. "Did any of the agencies accept his documents?" "No, thank God," Odessa said. "But Alaric, this is not just about the incompetency petition anymore. He is trying to liquidate your entire estate. The cabin, the warehouse, everything. This is not a man planning to take control of your finances gradually. This is a man trying to convert everything you own into cash as quickly as possible." Keaton's escalation from embezzlement to attempted real estate fraud told me everything I needed to know about his timeline. He was not planning a slow, careful competency case that would unfold over months of medical evaluations. He was trying to seize and liquidate assets immediately, which meant his debts had a deadline I had not yet identified, and that deadline was approaching fast. "How much time do we have?" I asked. "I filed our preemptive competency validation last week," Odessa said. "But Keaton is moving in parallel. If he files first with his forged medical documents, even if we prove they are fake later, the court could grant temporary emergency guardianship. He could drain accounts, sell property, all before we untangle the fraud. So we need to move faster," I said. "Yes," Odessa said. "And Alaric. Whatever you are planning, it needs to happen soon." I hung up and stared at Isolde's painting on my refrigerator. 2 stick figures with flashlights. A warehouse. A child's truth. I photographed the painting from multiple angles, creating high-resolution evidence files. As I was uploading the images to my secure laptop, my phone buzzed with a text from Mira Ellison at the Madison Courthouse. The message contained a single-line competency petition filed this morning. Hearing scheduled December 18th. 14 days. I had 2 weeks to dismantle Keaton's fraud operation before a judge would decide whether I was mentally fit to control my own life. But what I did not know yet was that Isolde's tablet, which Brielle had carelessly returned with her daughter, contained an audio recording from that warehouse night that would change everything. I plugged Isolde's forgotten tablet into the charger that Tuesday night, intending only to return it fully powered the next morning. But when the screen illuminated in my dark living room, a single notification changed everything. Recording stopped. 47 minutes, 22 seconds. Brielle had left it behind when they visited that morning, setting it on my kitchen counter, while Isolde showed me her painting. I had not thought about it until I was cleaning up after dinner and saw the small pink device sitting there, battery-dead, screen dark. Now the screen glowed in my hands, and that notification sat at the top like an accusation. Recording stopped. 47 minutes. I tapped the notification. The file opened with a black screen showing only a timestamp, November 14th, 2021, 1:32 a.m., the night of the second warehouse break-in. The night Isolde had painted in her watercolor. I pressed play. For the first 30 seconds, nothing. Just the muffled sound of movement fabric against plastic, the tablet being set down somewhere in a car. Then Isolde's small voice, sleepy and confused. "Mommy, why are we here?" "Shh, baby. We will be right back." You can play games on the tablet, okay? Just stay in the car. Brielle's voice. My daughter's voice. Gentle maternal lying. Then a car door opening and closing. Footsteps crunching on gravel. And 46 minutes of accidentally recorded audio as an 8-year-old girl played on her tablet in the back seat, not knowing she was documenting her parents committing a crime. The recording captured everything. The sound quality was poor, muffled by distance and glass, but I could hear voices. Keaton's voice louder, more insistent. Brielle's quieter, more hesitant. You just need to help me get into the warehouse," Keaton said. "That is all. That money is your father's and yours too." "But that is breaking in," Brielle started. "Ma, that is legacy," Keaton interrupted. "If your father does not share it, we take it. He is sitting on a fortune while we drown in debt, while our daughter goes without." "He is not sitting on anything," Brielle said. "He worked for everything he has, and you are his daughter. It should be yours. It will be yours eventually. We are just accelerating the timeline." Silence for a long moment. Then the sound of the warehouse door rattling, Keaton trying the lock. "I cannot get it open tonight," he said. "But I have someone who can. We just need the right moment," when Brielle asked. "Soon, before he changes something. Before he moves the money somewhere we cannot access it." I sat in my dark living room, the tablet screen casting blue light across my face, listening to my daughter and her husband plan to rob me while my granddaughter played games 50 feet away. At minute 23, I heard something that made my hands shake. Brielle laughed. Actually laughed at something Keaton said about my security protocols being obsolete, about old men who think locks are still enough, about how easy it would be if they had the right person opening that safe. And I realized I was not just gathering evidence against my son-in-law anymore. I was documenting the exact moment I lost my daughter. The recording continued. Keaton talking about debts. Brielle asking how much they owed. Keaton lying about the amount, saying 80,000, when I knew from Lucian it was over 400,000. Even in conspiracy, he was lying to her. At minute 37, Brielle said something that broke me. "My father would help us if we asked," she said. "He would give us money if we needed it. We do not have to steal from him." "He would give us enough to survive," Keaton said. "Not enough to be free, not enough to start over. We need everything, Brielle. Not charity, everything." Another silence. Then Brielle's voice quieter. "Okay," she said. "Okay. But no one gets hurt. Promise me no one gets hurt." "Of course not," Keaton said. "Your father will not even know it happened until we are long gone. How does a father reconcile 42 years of designing security systems to protect people with the knowledge that his own daughter needed no coercion, no manipulation, no threats to choose theft over integrity? How do you measure that kind of failure?" The recording played on. They returned to the car at minute 44. Isolde asking if they found what they were looking for. Brielle saying they would come back another time. The sound of the engine starting. The tablet being picked up and the recording accidentally stopped as Isolde closed the game app. 47 minutes and 22 seconds. I sat in the darkness after the recording ended, the tablet still glowing in my hands. Brielle had said it correctly. "But that is breaking in." She knew what they were planning. She named it accurately. And then she said, "Okay anyway." Not because Keaton threatened her. Not because she feared him. But because she chose money over her father. She chose the possibility of freedom over the certainty of integrity. That was the part that would destroy me in the courtroom if I played this recording. Not just proving Keaton's guilt, but proving my daughter's complicity. Proving she went willingly. Proving she laughed about it. I had 12 days until the competency hearing. 12 days to decide if I was willing to use this evidence that would save me but destroy her. I looked at the tablet screen at the recording file sitting there like a loaded weapon. I could protect my daughter and risk losing everything to Keaton's fraud. Or I could save myself and watch Brielle face criminal charges for conspiracy and attempted theft. Some choices do not have right answers. They only have consequences. When the recording finally ended at 47 minutes and 22 seconds, I sat in darkness with the tablet screen casting blue light across my face, and I understood that I now possessed the evidence to destroy my daughter's life completely. The competency hearing was 12 days away, and I had a choice to make use this recording to prove Brielle's complicity and guarantee my victory, or protect my daughter and risk losing everything. What I did not yet know was that Keaton had already made that choice impossible. Odessa Quinn's truck pulled up to the warehouse behind my lakeside cabin at 6 Wednesday morning, with 3 contractors, 2 carpenters, 1 electrician, and enough federal warning signs to turn my empty building into the most legally protected trap in Wisconsin. The night before, I had listened to my daughter choose betrayal on a 47-minute recording. Now I was watching Odessa transform that betrayal into evidence that would send her to prison. Keaton had made my choice for me by accelerating everything, by hiring forgers, by attempting to sell my property, by threatening my granddaughter through loan sharks. He had eliminated every option except this one, the trap. The trust paperwork is filed with the county as of 7 this morning, Odessa said, standing beside me in the cold December dawn. This warehouse is now legally a private trust facility under the Celestine Boone Family Trust. Anyone who enters without authorization is not committing simple trespass. They are violating federal trust property statutes. Good, I said. The contractors worked efficiently. Warning signs went up on every wall, every door, every access point. Large red letters on white metal, restricted access, private trust property, authorized personnel only, violations subject to federal prosecution. The warning signs need to be visible from every entry point, I told Odessa. I want no legal ambiguity when they break in. There won't be, she said. By the time they realize what they walked into, it will be too late to claim ignorance. At 8 a.m., the electrician confirmed all hidden cameras were operational. The same cameras that had been recording for weeks now, officially part of a federally protected trust facility's security system. At 9 a.m., the carpenters brought in the safe. It was a 1940s Chubb Manifoil authentic antique, the kind Garrick Thorne would recognize immediately as a challenge worth $30,000. The contractors bolted it to the floor with industrial bolts that would require power tools to remove. Inside, Odessa placed fake documents, copies of old patents, expired bonds, paperwork designed to look valuable from a distance but meaningless up close. On top of the documents, she placed a framed photograph of Celestine. The safe looks authentic enough to be worth the risk, Odessa said. Celestine's photo on top is a nice psychological touch. I stared at my wife's face in that photograph. She was smiling. It was from our 40th anniversary, the same day she gave me the leather notebook I now used as my evidence log. She would approve of this, Odessa said quietly. She built the legal fortress. You are just using it the way she intended. I have designed security systems for 42 years, but watching that 1940s safe bolted to the warehouse floor, I understood that the most effective traps are not the ones with the most sophisticated technology, but the ones that exploit the target's desperation so completely that they walk into obvious danger because they have no other choice. Keaton was desperate. The trap was perfect. And my daughter was going to walk into it beside him. At 2 p.m., I drove to the Lake Geneva Sheriff's Office. Sheriff Dalton Vane, a 23-year law enforcement veteran with iron-gray hair and the rare quality of listening to a complete plan before making judgments, was the tactical partner I needed for an operation that would either vindicate me or destroy my family completely. I sat across from his desk and laid out everything. The warehouse surveillance footage, Lucien's financial investigation, the forged medical documents, the attempted real estate fraud, the audio recording on Isolde's tablet, and the trap I had built to catch them all. Dalton listened without interrupting. He took notes. He asked 3 questions about legal jurisdiction, camera placement, and probable cause. Then he leaned back in his chair. "I can place 4 men inside the warehouse, 2 outside," he said. "No lights, no radio, complete silence. When you turn on the lights, we act. I need them caught with hands on the safe," I said. "Not approaching it, not examining it, touching it with intent to open. That is when the criminal intent becomes undeniable." "Understood," Dalton said. He looked at me for a long moment. "Your daughter will be arrested too if she is there. You understand that?" Silence filled the office. Outside, I could hear the muted sounds of the station phones ringing, voices in hallways, the normal operations of law enforcement. "Yes," I said. The moment I said yes to Sheriff Dalton's question about arresting Brielle was the moment I stopped being a father protecting his family and became something colder, something I spent my career building systems to stop a man willing to destroy everything to prove he was right. "Friday night," Dalton said. "That gives us 48 hours to position everything. I will have my team briefed by Thursday evening. They will move into position Friday at sundown. You will be where?" "Establishing alibi," I said. "I need to be documented as not present at the property when the break-in occurs. I will be at a friend's house 20 miles away with witnesses and cameras confirming my location." "Smart," Dalton said. "When this goes to court, you want distance between yourself and the arrest. You reported a crime, we responded. Clean." I stood to leave. We shook hands. "Now, one question," Dalton said. "Are you sure about this? Once we start, there is no calling it off. Your daughter gets arrested. Your son-in-law goes to prison. Your family is fractured permanently. You are certain this is what you want?" I looked at the sheriff for a long moment. "I am certain this is what they chose," I said. I walked out into the December afternoon, got in my truck, and checked my phone. One email waited in my inbox, sent from the Walworth County Court, at 1:47 p.m. Subject: emergency motion granted. Competency hearing rescheduled. I opened it. Keaton's emergency motion to accelerate the competency hearing had been granted. The hearing date was moved from December 18th to December 13th. 48 hours from now. Monday morning at 9 a.m., a judge would decide if I was mentally competent to control my own life. The trap was ready. The deputies were positioned. But Keaton had just cut my timeline in half. I sat in my truck in the sheriff's office parking lot staring at that email, and I understood with cold certainty that Keaton was not planning to wait for Friday. He was not planning to wait for Saturday. He was coming tonight. Lucian's call came at 11 Friday night, while I stood on the back porch watching the lake freeze in December darkness. And the first words out of his mouth rewrote everything I thought I knew about Keaton's motivation. 6 years ago, someone anonymously paid his $47,000 gambling debt, and that someone was you. I had been thinking about Keaton coming tonight, about the trap waiting, about deputies positioning themselves in darkness. Now I was thinking about something that happened 6 years ago when Keaton married my daughter. "Explain," I said into the phone. "The payment was routed through 3 intermediary trusts, but I traced it," Lucian said. "You paid Keaton's debt 6 years ago through Odessa's firm. $47,000 to cover gambling debts that were about to get very violent. The payment came from a trust account registered to you, but the authorization went through Odessa Quinn's office." I remembered. Not clearly, not with details, but I remembered Celestine sitting at our kitchen table with tears in her eyes, asking me to help Keaton one time. Just once. To give him a clean start with Brielle. To let him prove he could be better. "Celestine asked me to give him a second chance," I said. "She said everyone deserves one clean start." Keaton never knew who paid it, Lucian said. He thinks he got lucky with an anonymous benefactor, some wealthy gambler who forgives debts once in a lifetime. He has no idea the man he is trying to destroy is the one who saved him from collectors who break kneecaps as down payments. I hung up and stood on the porch in the cold. 6 years ago, I had saved Keaton from violence, from bankruptcy, from the kind of debt that follows you into parking lots with tire irons. I had given him a clean slate because my wife asked me to believe in redemption, and he had used that clean slate to accumulate even more debt, to steal from my daughter, to hire forgers and loan sharks, to plan my destruction. How do you measure the cost of kindness when the man you saved from bankruptcy 6 years ago is now trying to have you declared incompetent, so he can liquidate your life's work, and the wife who begged you to give him that second chance is gone, unable to see what her mercy created? I went inside, made coffee I would not drink, stared at my evidence log. At 8 Saturday morning, someone knocked on my door. Before I tell you what Corinne knew, are you still with me right now? Comment A if you think Alaric's mercy 6 years ago makes this betrayal worse, or B if kindness is never wasted regardless. Add one short reason. Please note what follows includes adapted details for narrative impact. If that's not for you, feel free to stop here. Corinne Riker, Keaton's 65-year-old mother with silver hair and the worn face of a woman who has spent 2 decades watching her son gamble away every chance she gave him, stood trembling in my doorway with the hardest decision a parent can make already written across her expression. Light rain fell behind her, misting her coat with droplets that caught the morning light. "Mr. Boone," she said. "May I come in?" I stepped back. She entered slowly like someone walking into a confession booth. We sat at my kitchen table. I poured her coffee she did not touch. "No, I overheard Keaton on the phone last night," she said without preamble. "They are coming Saturday night. He told someone he had one chance to fix everything. One chance before the hearing Monday morning." Saturday night. The timeline I had predicted. "Are you prepared to be a witness, Corinne?" I asked. "To testify about what you know?" She looked at me with eyes that had cried too many tears over too many years. "I have been silent for too long," she said. "I have known about Keaton's gambling since he was 19. 26 years of watching him lose money, lose jobs, lose respect. 26 years of hoping silence would protect him, hoping he would change on his own." "And now," I asked, watching Corinne Riker sit at my kitchen table in the rain, trembling as she prepared to testify against her own son, I understood that some parents spend their entire lives hoping silence will protect their children, and some spend their entire lives learning that silence only delays the inevitable. "Now I am done being silent," she said. "He is going to hurt someone. Maybe already has. My silence has enabled him for too long. I came to warn you, and to offer to testify to everything I know. The gambling, the debts, the lies to Brielle. All of it." "Why now?" I asked. "Because he brought Brielle into it," Corinne said. "Because my granddaughter Isolde should not grow up thinking theft is normal. Because I am 65 years old, and I do not want to die knowing I stayed quiet while my son destroyed good people." She pulled a folder from her purse. Bank statements, credit card bills, receipts from casinos dating back 15 years. Documentation of every loan she had given him, every debt she had covered, every promise he had broken. "I have been keeping records," she said, "in case I ever found the courage to stop him. Today, I found it." I took the folder, evidence from a mother who loved her son enough to document his crimes so someone could finally stop him. "Thank you," I said. "Do not thank me," Corinne said. "This is not mercy. This is 26 years too late." She left with instructions to meet Odessa Quinn that afternoon to give her formal statement. 5 minutes after she drove away, my phone buzzed. "Sheriff Dalton. Surveillance spotted your son-in-law at Madison Hardware." The text read, Purchased bolt cutters, heavy-duty flashlights, work gloves. Saturday night confirmed. I looked at the clock. Saturday, 9:47 a.m., 36 hours until Sunday night. 36 hours until the trap closed. I had everything I needed now. The legal framework Celestine built. The warehouse trap Odessa transformed. The tactical plan Dalton coordinated. The evidence log documenting weeks of fraud. The audio recording proving Brielle's complicity. And now Corinne's insider testimony spanning 26 years. I had saved Keaton once 6 years ago because Celestine asked me to believe in redemption. Now I was going to destroy him because he proved redemption was wasted on people who mistake mercy for weakness. What I did not know yet was that Keaton had one more move planned, one that would force me to choose between justice and protecting Isolde. Keaton Riker stood in Garrick Thorne's suburban garage Friday afternoon with $30,000 in cash and a phone containing a recording that could destroy the locksmith's second chance at life. 24 hours remained until tomorrow night's warehouse operation. Garrick stared at the banded stacks on his workbench, his weathered hands trembling slightly. I told you Wednesday I couldn't help. I'm done with that life. You're done when I say you're done. Keaton's voice carried the casual cruelty of someone who'd never faced real consequences. 30,000 for 3 hours of work. That's 10 grand an hour, Garrick. Better than any legitimate job you'll ever get with your record. I watched from my truck 2 blocks away, Lucian's surveillance feed streaming to my tablet. The private investigator had placed audio devices in Garrick's garage Thursday night, anticipating this exact confrontation. I served 3 years because of you. Garrick's jaw clenched. You promised the job was clean. You promised no one would get hurt. Ancient history. Keaton waved dismissively. This is different. We're just moving some equipment. The old man won't even be there. Lucian had briefed me on Keaton's strategy appeal to greed. First, then deploy the real leverage if the target resisted. I watched Garrick shake his head, watched him step back from the money. That's when Keaton pulled out his phone. Before you get righteous, listen to this. He pressed play, and a conversation I'd never heard before filled the garage, Garrick's voice unmistakable from what sounded like a phone call recorded months ago. Yeah, I can get into anything. Commercial grade, residential, even some safes if the model's right. I've done work the parole board doesn't know about. Cash jobs, no questions asked. That's how I've been making ends meet since I got out. Another voice responded, asking for specifics. Garrick, thinking he was talking to a potential client, had detailed illegal locksmith work he'd performed in the 18 months since his release violations that would send him back to prison for the remainder of his original sentence plus additional time. Keaton had posed as a criminal, seeking services, had recorded everything, and had waited until this moment to weaponize the evidence. "How you son of a—" Garrick lunged forward, but Keaton held up the phone like a shield. "Copies in 3 places," Keaton said calmly. "You touch me, they go straight to the cops. You refuse this job, same result. You help me tomorrow night, and this recording disappears forever. Your choice, locksmith." I felt my chest tighten watching this. Garrick Thorne had made mistakes both 8 years ago and more recently, but he'd been trying to rebuild. I'd written letters to the parole board on his behalf, had testified about the circumstances that led to his involvement in that botched warehouse job, had helped reduce his sentence, because I believed in second chances. Keaton was systematically destroying that redemption, turning it into leverage for his own fraud. The architecture of Keaton's scheme resembled a circuit board I'd once designed for a security system, redundant pathways, fail-safes, at every junction, each component serving multiple functions. His mother would provide emotional credibility at the competency hearing. Brielle would supply intimate details about my supposed decline. Garrick would handle physical access to the warehouse. Dr. Ellison's refusal had been anticipated and planned around. Every element interconnected, every backup in place. Except Keaton hadn't accounted for the fact that I designed the circuit board he was trying to hack. Garrick's shoulders sagged. "What exactly do you need me to do?" Keaton smiled, and I wanted to reach through the screen and tear that expression off his face. "Tomorrow night, 9 o'clock, you meet us at the warehouse on Clemens Road. There's a reinforced door my father-in-law installed, commercial-grade deadbolt, the kind you specialized in before your unfortunate incarceration. You open it, we move some equipment, you leave with $30,000 and a clean slate. Moving equipment." Garrick's voice was flat. "That's your story. That's the truth." Keaton's lie was so smooth, it almost sounded genuine. "The old man's hoarding valuable assets. His daughter, my wife, has power of attorney. We're legally entitled to secure those assets before he does something dangerous. You're helping prevent a tragedy, really." The rationalization was masterful. Keaton had convinced himself he was the hero of this story, that defrauding a 68-year-old man out of a $2.4 million trust was somehow justified by gambling debts and wounded pride. Garrick reached for the money slowly, each movement weighted with defeat. "I need your word that recording gets deleted. So, you have it." Keaton's word, I knew from Lucian's investigation, was worth exactly nothing. 9 o'clock tomorrow night. Bring your tools. Wear dark clothes. This'll be the easiest 10 grand an hour you've ever made. After Keaton left, I watched Garrick sink onto his workbench stool, head in his hands, $30,000 in cash beside him, like a monument to compromise. The surveillance feed captured 3 seconds of absolute silence. No movement, no sound, just a 58-year-old man measuring the distance between the life he'd tried to build and the one he couldn't escape. Those 3 seconds contained more defeat than his entire 3-year prison sentence. My phone rang at 6:17 that evening. Brielle's number. I let it ring twice before answering, knowing this was reconnaissance, knowing every word I said would be reported back to Keaton. "Hi, sweetheart." I kept my voice warm, casual, the father who suspected nothing. Dad. "I was thinking about stopping by tomorrow evening. Around 8:30. Her voice carried false brightness that shredded my heart. "I could bring dinner. We haven't spent enough time together since Mom passed." She was confirming I'd be home. She was establishing my location for the exact hour when Keaton would be breaking into my warehouse. She was ensuring their plan would proceed without interference. My daughter, who I'd taught to ride a bicycle, who I'd walked down the aisle, who I'd trusted with every vulnerable part of my heart, was setting me up for the final phase of her husband's fraud. That sounds wonderful," I said, and meant it in ways she couldn't imagine. 8:30 tomorrow. I'll be here." After we hung up, I sat in my truck watching the surveillance feeds, watching Sheriff Dalton Vane position his deputies, watching Odessa Quinn finalize the legal documentation that would spring the trap in 24 hours. The question that haunted me wasn't whether I'd witness my daughter's arrest tomorrow night. The question was whether I'd be able to watch her face when she realized I'd known all along, when she understood that every reconnaissance call, every concerned visit, every tender lie had been recorded, documented, and prepared for presentation to a judge. 24 hours remained, and I still hadn't decided if a father's love required witnessing his daughter's destruction or sparing himself the memory of that moment. I drove to Tobin Ashford's fishing cabin 20 miles north of Lake Geneva at 8 Friday night with an overnight bag and a strategy that required me to be legally documented as sleeping somewhere else when my daughter committed breaking and entering 4 hours later. The decision had crystallized during that reconnaissance call with Brielle. A father's love didn't require choosing between witnessing and absence. It required engineering a solution where I could be both legally innocent and physically present 20 miles away on camera, and 200 yards away in reality. Tobin Ashford, a 73-year-old retired postal worker and my fishing companion for 15 years, owned a cabin with security cameras and the kind of unquestioning loyalty that let me establish an alibi without explaining why I needed one. He met me at the door with 2 beers and a chessboard asked no questions, and we settled into comfortable silence. Sheriff Dalton Vane arrived at 10 o'clock, exactly as we'd arranged. His patrol car appeared in the driveway, visible on the cabin's exterior security camera that time-stamped every frame. Dalton stepped inside, uniform crisp. "Evening, Alaric." "Tobin." "Sheriff." I raised my beer bottle. "Everything all right?" "Just checking in." His eyes held mine for 3 seconds. "Security camera confirms you're here at 10 p.m. Friday. When they break in, you'll be documented 20 miles away." "When do your deputies move into position?" "Midnight. 4 inside the warehouse, 2 outside. Complete radio silence until you give the signal." Dalton glanced at Tobin, who was studying his chess pieces with deliberate focus. "You staying here all night?" "That's the plan," I said, and watched him note the answer for his eventual report. After Dalton left, Tobin moved his bishop and said quietly, "Whatever you're doing, I hope it's worth it. It's not about worth, it's about necessary." At 11:15, I told Tobin I was turning in early. I went to the guest bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed with my tablet on my knees, Dalton's live surveillance feed already loaded. My formal vest and tie hung on the chair beside me, the closest thing to ceremony I could offer from 20 miles away. At 12:40, Dalton's text confirmed deputies in position. I sat in Tobin's guest bedroom and watched the arrest happen on a 4-inch screen the same way I had watched everything else, not from the center of the action, but from the place that kept the evidence clean. Through night vision binoculars, I watched Dalton's deputies move into position 4, slipping through the side entrance, using keys I'd provided to, taking positions behind storage containers in the yard. At 1:15, Lucian's text arrived. 3 minutes out. Garrick driving, Brielle passenger seat, Keaton back seat. My hands shook. I set down the binoculars, breathed slowly, picked them back up. Headlights appeared at 1:18. Garrick's truck pulled into the driveway and killed the engine. 3 doors opened. 3 figures emerged carrying flashlights. Keaton moved ahead with false confidence. Brielle followed 2 steps behind her, posture tense. Garrick brought up the rear, carrying his locksmith's case like a burden. They approached the warehouse door, and Garrick aimed his flashlight at the lock. He froze. "This is a Medico Grade 3. Garrick's voice carried in the still night air. "This is bank-grade security. Why does an old warehouse have commercial-level locks?" My chest tightened. Garrick knew. His professional instincts had recognized what Keaton's arrogance had missed, that no senile elderly man installs $2,000 deadbolts on deteriorating storage buildings. Senile old man bought expensive equipment. Keaton's dismissal was sharp. He probably doesn't even remember installing it. Just open it. Garrick stood motionless for 5 seconds, flashlight beam steady on the lock that announced trap as clearly as a sign. Then he set down his case and pulled out his tools. $30,000 and a blackmail recording had just overridden 15 years of hard-won professional caution. Brielle turned away from the door. "I'll cut the power from the back." 2 minutes, watching Brielle walk toward the power switch through night vision surveillance. I understood that cutting electricity to commit theft against her father was not the betrayal itself, but the physical manifestation of a choice she made weeks ago when Keaton first asked, and she said yes instead of calling to warn me. She rounded the corner of the warehouse. Disappeared from view. Reappeared near the electrical panel mounted on the back wall. Her hand reached for the main breaker. I thought about calling out thought, about giving her one final chance to stop thought, about the 8-year-old girl who'd sat on my shoulders at the county fair and the 38-year-old woman about to commit felony breaking and entering. She pulled the breaker down. The warehouse lights died, plunging the building into darkness that she believed was cover, but was actually the signal Sheriff Dalton's deputies had been waiting for to activate infrared night vision and assume tactical positions around the interior. I stood 200 yards away, watching 3 flashlight beams approach the door, and I realized that in less than 5 minutes, my daughter would be in handcuffs unless one of them recognized the trap and ran. But Garrick was blackmailed, Keaton was desperate, and Brielle had already chosen her side. Garrick's tools scraped against the Medeco cylinder. The lock clicked open. The door swung inward. 3 flashlight beams entered the warehouse, illuminating the bolted safe in the center of the room, the safe that contained carefully arranged fake documents, and one final piece of evidence that would transform this arrest from legal necessity into something unforgivable. What I didn't know yet was that opening that safe would reveal something I had placed there myself the morning before. A photograph of Celestine on our wedding day, and a handwritten note I'd written to Brielle that began with words I had never expected to need. If you are reading this inside my warehouse at 2 in the morning, then I want you to know I love you anyway, and your mother would ask you to come home. The warehouse door broke open at 2 a.m. exactly, with a crack that echoed across the frozen lake, and through my night vision binoculars, 200 yards away, I watched Garrick Thorne step through first, followed by Keaton pushing Brielle ahead of him like a human shield. 3 flashlight beams swept across the interior, illuminating dust particles suspended in frigid air. The warehouse had been empty for 18 months, except for the safe I'd moved to the center 3 weeks ago, and the 6 sheriff's deputies who'd been positioned in darkness since midnight. Keaton tore down the federal warning signs I'd posted on the interior walls, signs declaring the building under investigation for financial crimes, signs that would have given any reasonable person cause to retreat. He crumpled them and shoved them in his pocket, eliminating what he believed was evidence of my paranoia. There it is. Keaton's flashlight beam landed on the antique safe. Right where the old man said he kept everything valuable. Start drilling. Garrick approached the safe, slowly setting down his tool bag, with the careful movements of someone who knew he was committing a felony. This is a Chubb manifold mechanism from the 1940s. It'll take at least 20 minutes. Well, then get started. Keaton's voice carried the sharp edge of desperation poorly disguised as authority. Brielle hadn't spoken since entering. Her flashlight beam wandered across the walls, across the ceiling, across shadows that might have hidden watchers if she'd known to look for the telltale signs of surveillance equipment. I'll watch from outside. Her voice was barely audible. Someone needs to see if anyone comes. She walked back toward the door, and I realized she was positioning herself for escape, the last thread of self-preservation, pulling her away from the center of the crime. Garrick pulled out his drill and began working on the safe mechanism. The high-pitched whine filled the warehouse, drowning out the sound of 6 deputies breathing in darkness, watching through infrared night vision that rendered the criminals as bright orange figures against cold blue backgrounds. Every word they'd spoken had been captured by hidden microphones. Every movement recorded by cameras positioned in rafters and wall panels. The federal warning signs Keaton had destroyed were replicas. The originals were already logged as evidence of obstruction. Through night vision binoculars, I watched my daughter stand guard outside while her husband committed felony burglary inside, and I understood that every parent imagines the moment they realize their child has become someone they don't recognize, but nothing prepares you for watching it happen in real time, with 6 armed deputies waiting for your signal to destroy what remains of your family. The drill screamed against metal. Garrick worked methodically, his professional training evident in the precision of each adjustment. Keaton paced behind him, flashlight beam jerking across walls with each nervous pivot. How much longer? Keaton's voice rose above the drill noise. 15 minutes, maybe 12 if the tumblers are worn. Work faster. Garrick didn't respond, just kept drilling. The sound created a rhythm, 3 seconds of high-pitched contact, 2 seconds of adjustment repeat. I counted the cycles, 47, 48. At 2:23 a.m., Garrick stopped abruptly. What? Keaton's flashlight beam swung toward him. Why'd you stop? I hear something in the walls. Garrick's voice was tight. We should leave. It's an old building. It's just the wind or the pipes. Finish the job. Garrick hesitated. His body language screaming flight instinct, $30,000, battling against survival instinct. Listen to me. Keaton moved closer, and his voice dropped, but the hidden microphones captured every word with perfect clarity. If anything happens, this was Brielle's idea. She wanted her father's money. She suggested it first. I'm just helping my wife. The words hung in the cold air like smoke. What? Garrick's drill lowered slightly. I'm just saying for the record, this was all her plan from the beginning. She's the one who knew about the trust and the warehouse and everything. I'm just here because she asked me to help her family. Keaton's words blaming Brielle traveled through hidden microphones into recording devices that would play them back in courtrooms and depositions for years, but they traveled faster through thin warehouse walls into Brielle's ears, and I realized that some betrayals are engineered by elaborate traps, while others are simply spoken aloud by cowards who panic when they hear sounds in walls. Outside, visible through the open doorway in my night vision field, Brielle's body went rigid. She'd heard every word. Her flashlight beam, which had been sweeping the perimeter in steady arcs, froze, pointing at the ground. For 3 seconds, she didn't move. Then her hand came up to her mouth, pressing against her lips, as if trying to hold in a sound that might escape. Inside, Garrick had returned to drilling. The noise resumed louder now as he pushed harder against worn tumblers. Keaton stood behind him, breathing visible relief at having spoken his prepared betrayal aloud, creating what he believed was distance between himself and criminal culpability. He'd just confessed to conspiracy on a federal recording while attempting to frame his wife. Brielle leaned against the warehouse exterior wall, with both hands pressed flat against the metal siding, as if trying to hold herself upright. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. The surveillance audio later showed that she made no sound, no cry, no gasp, no word, just the quiet devastation of understanding that the man she'd chosen over her father, the man she'd helped commit fraud, the man she'd betrayed her family to protect, had prepared to sacrifice her the moment circumstances threatened him. The drill pitch changed. Garrick was breaking through the final tumbler mechanism. Almost there, he said. And I heard victory in his voice, the criminal's relief at nearly completing the crime. I raised my phone. Sheriff Dalton's number already loaded, my thumb hovering over the send button that would activate the warehouse lights and announce the arrest. Through my binoculars, I saw Brielle still pressed against the wall, crying silently, while her husband inside continued working to open the safe that would reveal not just evidence of embezzlement, but carefully organized files proving I'd been planning this trap for 2 years. When Garrick opened that safe, Brielle would see through the doorway what was inside, and she would understand exactly how long her father had been waiting for this moment. Garrick Thorne stood abruptly at 2:31 a.m. and shined his flashlight toward the ceiling corner, where an infrared camera lens reflected back at him like a predator's eye. And in that instant, the 58-year-old locksmith understood that the old man everyone called senile had built the most perfect trap he had ever seen. Cameras. Garrick's voice went flat. His flashlight beam swept to the other corners, finding 3 more lenses. Motion sensors. The beam dropped to floor level, illuminating thin wires running along the perimeter. This is a trap. Everything is a trap. Keaton's flashlight jerked upward, found the cameras jerked back to Garrick. Impossible! That old man isn't capable of... Do you know who designed the State Federal Bank security system in 2003? Garrick's flashlight beam froze on the camera lens. His voice dropped to something barely audible. I know this setup. I know these sensors. I spent 3 years in prison because of a system exactly like this one. He turned to Keaton slowly. Who owns this property? Keaton stared at him. Some old man named Boone. Why does it... Garrick closed his eyes. Alaric Boone. You know him. He's the reason I only served 3 years instead of 8. Garrick set his drill down on the concrete floor with the careful movement of someone surrendering. He wrote a letter to my judge. The warehouse held its breath. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. You're paranoid. But Keaton's voice cracked. He's senile. The doctors said, there are no doctors. Garrick's realization came in pieces, each one clicking into place with the precision of tumbler mechanisms he'd spent his life manipulating. The professional-grade lock, the bolted safe positioned for optimal camera coverage, the federal warning signs you tore down that documented your obstruction. This isn't an old man protecting assets. This is a security engineer documenting crimes. From my position in the tree line 200 yards away, I watched Garrick understand what Keaton's arrogance had prevented him from seeing, that underestimating your opponent's capability is the fatal flaw every security system exploits. I pressed send on my phone. The warehouse exploded into light. Halogen floods mounted in the rafters activated simultaneously, transforming the dark building into brightness harsh as daylight. Keaton and Garrick froze, their flashlight beams suddenly irrelevant against illumination designed to eliminate every shadow. The halogen floods activated simultaneously. Standing in the center of the room, exactly 20 feet behind the open safe, was Odessa Quinn holding a laptop displaying evidence files. Beside her, Sheriff Dalton Vane with his hand resting on his holster. Dr. Mira Ellison with medical documentation. Ingrid Vale clutching Celestine's diary. Corinne Riker with her head bowed. 6 deputies emerged from positions along the walls. I was not there in person. I had kept my distance, my alibi clean, my legal position unimpeachable. But Dalton carried a printed photograph of me, a formal portrait taken the morning before, and he set it on top of the safe when the lights came on, so the first thing Keaton saw when the room went bright was my face looking back at him. Dalton's voice carried through the live audio feed on my tablet 20 miles away. Mr. Riker, this facility belongs to Alaric Boone. He says hello. Every security system I'd designed in 42 years operated on one principle: give the target what they think they want until they commit fully to taking it. Then reveal that what they wanted never existed, and what they took was their own freedom. And watching Keaton's face as the lights came on was watching that principle achieve perfect execution. Dalton's voice carried through the warehouse speakers, playing a pre-recorded message I had prepared 3 days earlier. I've been a security systems engineer for 42 years. I've never installed a system without full documentation. On the wall behind me, a television screen activated playing surveillance footage in split-screen format. Keaton meeting with the fake neurologist at the coffee shop. Garrick accepting $30,000 in his garage. Brielle making reconnaissance calls from her kitchen. Corinne practicing her testimony about my supposed decline. Audio recordings played through mounted speakers. Isolde's phone call. Keaton pressuring Brielle, his statement 20 minutes ago, blaming his wife for planning the theft. This is entrapment. Keaton found his voice finally. You broke into legally posted federal trust property. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. Recording devices captured your statement that this was Brielle's idea. The only person entrapped here is my daughter by your cowardice." Odessa turned her laptop screen to show financial records, every withdrawal from the trust, every forged signature, every fraudulent document traced back through 3 years of planning. Garrick had gone perfectly still, his locksmith tools hanging forgotten in his hands. "The safe," Keaton said desperately. "You put money in there. You baited us. Look at what's in the safe, Keaton." Garrick had opened it during my speech, and now its contents were visible in the harsh light. No cash, no bonds, no valuable documents. Just a framed photograph of Celestine from our wedding day, fake patent copies worth nothing, and a handwritten note addressed to Brielle in my own handwriting. The exit twist landed with the weight of 3 years planning. I'd never intended to protect assets, only to create an irresistible target that would force Keaton to commit documented federal crimes with every witness necessary for his complete destruction. There was never any money here," I said quietly. "Just evidence that you'd attempt to steal from a trust specifically designed to disinherit anyone who challenged it. You didn't break into a warehouse, Keaton. You walked into documentation. I sat in that warehouse in my best suit, surrounded by lawyers and law enforcement and evidence of 3 weeks of surveillance, and I understood that I'd completely destroyed my son-in-law utterly and guaranteed my daughter would spend years in prison, which meant the only victory I'd achieved was proving I could sacrifice everything I loved to be right." Corinne Riker stepped forward, her voice barely audible. "I'm sorry. He's my son, but I'm sorry for what he did to you." Sheriff Dalton moved toward Keaton and Garrick. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will." "And wait." Keaton's eyes locked on something behind me. "Brielle, tell them. Tell them this was your idea. Tell them I was just helping you." I turned in my chair. Brielle stood silhouetted in the warehouse doorway, her face illuminated by the harsh lights that revealed tear tracks on her cheeks, and an expression I'd never seen before. Something past grief, past anger, into territory that had no name. Odessa turned her laptop again, cueing the audio file where Keaton blamed Brielle for everything. 47 minutes of you pressuring her to participate," Odessa said, "followed by your statement claiming it was her plan from the beginning." Keaton looked past me toward Brielle, and he opened his mouth to say something that would either be confession or accusation. What I didn't know yet was that Brielle had already made her choice, and it was neither the one Keaton expected nor the one I hoped for. Sheriff Dalton finished handcuffing Garrick Thorne at 2:41 a.m. and began escorting him toward the warehouse door, but then stopped and asked a question that would transform a simple arrest into a moral reckoning that had been 20 years in the making. "Garrick Thorne, in 2004, you were arrested for breaking into State Federal Bank." Dalton's voice carried the formal tone of testimony. "Do you remember who designed the system that caught you?" Garrick went still between 2 deputies. "Do you know who wrote the letter to the judge requesting sentence reduction from 8 years to 3 years? Dalton glanced back at me. "That same person." Garrick turned slowly. His eyes found mine across 20 feet of concrete floor. I nodded once. For 5 seconds, Garrick stood absolutely motionless. His face cycled through confusion, then recognition, then something that might have been understanding. Not gratitude, I'd never wanted that, but acknowledgement that the man who'd built the trap that caught him had also argued for his reduced sentence. Wyatt Garrick's voice was barely audible. "Because catching people and believing they deserve second chances aren't contradictory," I said. "You served your time. You tried to rebuild. That mattered." Garrick looked at me for 3 more seconds, then allowed the deputies to lead him toward the door. He looked back once before stepping into the December darkness, and in that glance I saw what I'd hoped for 20 years ago, recognition that mercy can exist alongside justice. The deputies guided him into a patrol car. The door closed with a sound like a safe locking. What does it mean to show mercy to the people you catch when catching people is what you do for a living? And how do you reconcile spending 42 years designing traps with spending just as many years writing letters, asking judges to be lenient to the people who walked into them? I'd never found a satisfactory answer. I'd only found the action itself, the designing and the letter writing, existing side by side, neither canceling the other. Keaton sat handcuffed on the warehouse floor, his back against the wall. His expensive jacket was torn at the shoulder from when he'd tried to run and been tackled. "Do you know anything about hardship?" Keaton's voice rose, desperate. "Being unable to pay debts. You're sitting on money while we sink." I crossed the warehouse floor and sat on the concrete beside him, my suit pants getting dusty. "I know," I said quietly. "I paid your $47,000 gambling debt 6 years ago. Anonymous. Because Celestine asked me to give you a chance." Keaton's mouth opened, closed. No sound emerged. "Oh, she saw something in you I couldn't see. She believed you'd use that clean slate to rebuild. That's why I paid it without telling anyone." The warehouse held absolute silence. "You—" Keaton's voice cracked. "Why didn't you—" "Because mercy doesn't come with conditions. And because announcing generosity transforms it into leverage. I gave you a clean slate. What you did with it was your choice." Keaton stared at the concrete floor between his knees. For the first time since I'd met him 9 years ago at Brielle's engagement dinner, he had no response. No manipulation. No excuse. Just silence that acknowledged what he'd done with the second chance my wife had begged me to give him. I stood slowly. "Dalton, take him away." 2 deputies lifted Keaton to his feet and guided him toward a separate patrol car. He didn't look back. Didn't try to speak again. Just walked into the night like a man who'd finally run out of words. I found Brielle outside the warehouse at 3:10 a.m., standing against the exterior wall in the exact spot where she'd cried silently while her husband betrayed her. She wasn't handcuffed yet. Sheriff Dalton had left her free while the others were processed, because she'd been outside during the actual break-in. "Did you know?" Her voice was flat. "From the beginning? From the night I saw you with the flashlight at the warehouse?" She nodded slowly. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since Odessa showed me the forged power of attorney documents 3 weeks ago. But I've been watching since the night you helped him case the warehouse. I didn't know what else to do." Her words came out mechanical, rehearsed. "He said we'd lose everything. He said you'd be better off in managed care. He made it sound like we were helping you. You'll be arrested and may face charges. Odessa will try to mitigate the consequences. But I can't stop it." A police officer approached a young woman with gentle hands, who handcuffed Brielle with her wrists in front, rather than behind a small mercy Sheriff Dalton had authorized. She guided Brielle toward a waiting patrol car, reading Miranda rights in a quiet voice. Watching my daughter walk toward the police car, with her hands handcuffed in front, because Dalton allowed that small dignity, I understood that I'd achieved every strategic objective I'd planned, destroyed the man who'd tried to destroy me and protected the trust from fraud. But the cost was watching the person I loved most walk away without looking back, because looking back would have broken us both. Brielle never turned, never glanced over her shoulder, never offered a final word or gesture. She stepped into the patrol car and stared straight ahead while the officer closed the door. Some family betrayals create distances too painful to bridge with eye contact or final words. Sometimes the only way to survive being arrested by your own father's trap is to keep walking forward without acknowledging what you're leaving behind. The police cars pulled away at 3:17 a.m., with red and blue lights painting the frozen lake in colors that reminded me of Isolde's painting. I stood alone in the warehouse doorway with Odessa and Dr. Mira gathering evidence behind me, I had won completely, which meant I'd also lost everything that mattered. The competency hearing scheduled for Monday morning would rule me mentally fit to control my own life at the exact moment when I no longer had a family to share that life with. What I didn't know yet was that Brielle had asked Odessa a question in the police car that would change the resolution I thought I'd achieved. 6 weeks after the warehouse arrest, I sat in Walworth County Courthouse watching Judge Helena Blackwell deliver sentences that would determine whether the trap I built had created justice or simply revenge dressed in legal proceedings. Judge Helena Blackwell, a 30-year veteran of Walworth County Criminal Court, with a reputation for balancing punishment with rehabilitation, presided over the trial with the kind of measured wisdom that recognized when justice required both accountability and mercy. The courtroom was half empty. Keaton sat at the defense table flanked by his public defender, his expensive suits replaced by county jail orange. Garrick sat 2 rows back, already convicted through a cooperation plea. Brielle sat alone in the 3rd row on the opposite side, her elementary school teacher clothes looking worn after 6 weeks of legal proceedings. I sat in the back corner where I could see everyone without being seen. Keaton Riker, you are sentenced to 7 years in state prison, without possibility of parole on 4 felony counts: armed burglary, real estate fraud, destruction of trust documents, and falsification of medical records. Judge Blackwell's voice carried no emotion, just the weight of law applied to documented crimes. The court finds your actions demonstrated premeditation, exploitation of family relationships, and willingness to endanger a minor child through your association with loan shark operations. Keaton stood motionless as 2 bailiffs moved toward him. No final speech. No protest. Just the mechanical compliance of a man who'd run out of angles. Garrick Thorne, your cooperation with law enforcement and testimony regarding coercion reduced your exposure significantly. Combined with letters from community members, including the victim, the court sentences you to 3 years with credit for time served and eligibility for work release after 18 months. Garrick nodded once, accepting the sentence that Odessa had negotiated after I'd told her I wouldn't object to leniency. Some people deserved second chances. Some people earned them through 20 years of trying. While Mercer Crowe was sentenced separately through federal court to 2 years for threatening a minor felony usury and interstate loan sharking operations. That case was prosecuted independently by the FBI. Then Judge Blackwell turned to Brielle. Brielle Boone Riker. This court has reviewed extensive evidence of psychological manipulation, financial coercion, and documented patterns of domestic control. While you participated in criminal conspiracy, the evidence shows you were manipulated by your husband over a period of years. Given your cooperation, your lack of prior criminal history, and compelling testimony about the circumstances of your involvement, the court suspends your 18-month sentence. Odessa had spent 2 weeks presenting evidence of coercive control, Keaton's recorded statement, blaming Brielle before she could speak financial records, proving he had hidden their true debt level from her testimony, from Brielle's therapist documenting patterns of psychological manipulation spanning 4 years, and the audio from Isolde's tablet, showing Brielle actively questioning the plan and being overridden at every point. The suspended sentence was not leniency. It was the law recognizing that not every person standing at the warehouse door had arrived there freely. You will complete 200 hours of community service and serve 5 years supervised probation. Violation of probation terms will result in immediate incarceration. Brielle's shoulders shook. Her lawyer touched her arm gently. When the judge said 18 months suspended with probation, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel since the warehouse arrest relief that the trap I'd built had caught my daughter, but that Odessa had found a door I didn't know existed a way for Brielle to walk out not destroyed, but accountable. And I understood that justice without mercy is just revenge with paperwork. As the courtroom emptied, Brielle and I passed each other in the aisle. Our eyes met for the first time since the arrest. This time she didn't look away. Neither did I. No words. Just 3 seconds of acknowledgement that we'd both survived something that should have destroyed us completely. Outside, Odessa found me on the courthouse steps. She didn't look away this time. That's something. It's something, I agreed. There's more, Odessa said. Come to my office tomorrow. There's something Brielle needs to receive and something you need to understand. The next morning, I sat in Odessa's small conference room while she handed Brielle an envelope that had been stored in her office safe for 3 years. Your mother left this with me before she died. She gave specific instructions to deliver it only when you needed it most. Odessa's voice was gentle. I believe that time is now. Through the conference room window, I watched Brielle open the envelope with trembling hands. Watched her unfold pages written in Celestine's careful cursive. Watched her face cycle through confusion, then grief, then something that might have been hope. Odessa stepped out of the conference room and closed the door, giving Brielle privacy. She sat beside me in the waiting area. What does it say? I asked quietly. Celestine knew Alaric. She knew about Keaton's gambling long before she died. She knew he'd eventually pressure Brielle into something desperate. The letter acknowledges that Brielle will make a wrong choice once. Odessa pulled out a photocopy she'd made for legal records and read aloud. Odessa had made one photocopy of the letter for legal records. She showed me the opening line, just the first sentence, before resealing it. It starts with, I know you will make a wrong choice once. She folded the copy and slid it back into the folder. The rest was between Celestine and her daughter. I won't read it aloud, but I will tell you this: your wife knew, and she forgave Brielle before the crime ever happened. My vision blurred. I blinked hard, but tears came anyway, the first I'd allowed since the arrest. How does a wife prepare for every contingency her husband might face years after her death? And how does a man who spent 42 years engineering security systems realize that his wife was quietly engineering something far more sophisticated, a framework not for catching criminals, but for saving daughters who become them? She left the letter 3 years ago with specific instructions. Odessa continued. She knew Alaric. She prepared for this. While you were building your trap to catch Keaton, she was building a bridge to bring Brielle back. I sat in that office chair and cried for the wife who'd been wiser than me, for the daughter who'd gotten a second chance I thought I'd destroyed, and for the realization that I'd spent 6 weeks believing I'd won when really Celestine had been winning all along. Through the conference room window, I watched Brielle fold the letter carefully and press it against her chest. Odessa touched my shoulder. The competency hearing was dismissed 3 weeks ago as obviously frivolous. You own your life again, Alaric. The question is what you'll do with it. I had built the perfect trap. I had caught everyone who'd conspired against me. I had protected every asset and proven my mental fitness. But Celestine had built something better, a path back from destruction, a letter that acknowledged mistakes without condemning the person who made them, a framework that caught people at their worst and showed them how to reach their best. What I didn't know yet was that Brielle had one more decision to make, and it would determine whether Celestine's letter was prophecy or just hope. 3 weeks after the trial, my daughter arrived at my lakeside cabin door on a winter afternoon, holding Isolde's painting of 2 people with flashlights, and the first snow of the year fell between us like a curtain I could pull aside or let remain closed forever. Brielle's decision had been made. She was here. She stood on the porch in a gray wool coat, dusted with snowflakes. Her hands gripping the painting's frame so tightly, her knuckles showed white. Isolde bounced beside her mittened hands, catching snowflakes. I don't know where to begin. Brielle said finally, her voice barely audible over the wind coming off the frozen lake. I looked at the painting she held, the watercolor Isolde had created of two figures with flashlights approaching a building, the painting that had hung in their kitchen and served as evidence that an 8-year-old child had witnessed her parents casing my warehouse. The painting that prosecutors had photographed and catalogued and presented in court. Brielle had brought it back to me not as apology, but as acknowledgement. She was not pretending the betrayal hadn't happened. She was holding the proof of it in her hands and standing at my door anyway. That transformed the painting from evidence into something else, entirely a symbol that reconciliation begins not with forgetting, but with facing exactly what you did. "Now come in," I said, stepping back to widen the doorway. "You don't have to apologize today. Just come inside today." Isolde didn't wait for her mother's permission. She darted past me into the cabin, her winter boots tracking snow across hardwood floors. "Grandpa, I brought you my painting, the one you saw before." Her voice carried the uncomplicated joy of a child who didn't fully understand why 6 months had passed without seeing her grandfather, who only knew that the absence had ended and the familiar cabin smelled like wood smoke and the hot chocolate Grandpa always made. Brielle remained frozen at the threshold. 1 foot on the porch, 1 foot hovering above the cabin floor. I understood that hesitation. She was testing whether crossing this threshold meant forgiveness or simply a temporary truce. She was calculating whether her father would use this visit as leverage or accept it as the fragile beginning it was. "Brielle," I said quietly, "come inside, it's cold." She took 1 step forward, then another. Crossed the threshold with the careful movements of someone walking across ice that might crack. Watching Brielle stand at my threshold, unable to enter or retreat, I understood that reconciliation is not a door you walk through once, but a threshold you stand on, repeatedly testing your weight on floorboards that groan under the burden of what you did and what was done to you. And some days, the only victory is not stepping back outside into the snow. Isolde had already found the hot chocolate supplies in the kitchen, dragging a chair to the counter to reach the cocoa powder. Brielle moved toward her daughter on autopilot, helping her reach the mugs, and I watched them work together in my kitchen as if the past 6 months were a gap they could bridge through the simple ritual of making hot drinks on a winter afternoon. My phone rang in my office. Lucian's name appeared on the screen. "I'll just be a moment," I told them and stepped into the adjacent room. "Alaric, final report." Lucian's voice carried the satisfaction of a man closing a case file. Mercer Crowe pleaded guilty. FBI closed the case. Keaton's former company withdrew their embezzlement lawsuit. He has no assets left to claim. The secret account under his mistress's name was frozen after she disappeared, and federal prosecutors are still tracking her. "Good shandy," I said, watching snow accumulate on the frozen lake through my office window. "We'd one final detail: your security system patent renewed for 15 years. Valuation came back at $1.8 million. Your financial advisor called my office by mistake. I told them to contact you directly." I stood very still, absorbing that information. For 6 months, I'd been fighting to protect a trust worth $2.4 million from a son-in-law who wanted to steal it. I'd built elaborate traps, documented every crime, sacrificed my relationship with my daughter to prevent the theft, and I'd been sitting on intellectual property worth nearly as much that had never been threatened at all. Lucian's report listed every subplot, resolved every antagonist sentenced or disappeared, every financial detail accounted for with the precision of a man closing a case file. But what he couldn't quantify was whether I felt victorious or simply tired, whether protecting my assets justified destroying my family, whether being right was worth being alone until my daughter found courage to knock. "Thank you, Lucian, for everything. Send me your final invoice." "It's already sent. Take care of yourself, Alaric, and take care of that family you fought so hard to protect." After he hung up, I remained standing at the window. The patent revelation meant the financial threat had never been as existential as it appeared. Yes, losing the trust would have hurt. Yes, Keaton's fraud needed to be stopped. But I'd always had the patent. I'd always had the intellectual property that made me valuable to security companies and banks. The money Keaton tried to steal was important, but it wasn't survival. The real battle had been about principle. About refusing to be defrauded by a con artist who'd married into my family. About proving I wasn't the senile old man they'd tried to paint me as. And about whether justice mattered more than mercy. I walked back into the main room, where Brielle was helping Isolde add marshmallows to 3 mugs of hot chocolate. She'd made one for me without asking. "Thank you," I said, accepting the mug. We sat on the couch, facing the fireplace. Isolde between us, chattering about school and her art class and the snow. Brielle and I said almost nothing, but we were present in the same room, drinking the same hot chocolate, watching the same fire. It wasn't forgiveness yet. It was just presence. But presence was something. Later, after they'd left, and I sat alone watching the frozen lake turn silver in twilight, I understood that Celestine's letter had been right. Brielle was her father's daughter with strength in her blood, and that strength had brought her back across a threshold I thought I'd closed forever. The competency case was dismissed. The criminals were sentenced. The assets were protected. And my family was fractured, but beginning the slow process of healing. What I didn't know yet was whether I had the strength Celestine saw in me to forgive as completely as I had planned for justice. 4 months after the warehouse arrest, spring returned to Lake Geneva with the kind of gentle warmth that melts frozen things slowly, and my 8-year-old granddaughter Isolde announced that we should paint the warehouse yellow because it needed to look like sunshine instead of secrets. I had the strength Celestine saw in me. It took 4 months to discover it, but forgiveness arrived the same way spring did, gradually in small moments that accumulated, until one morning I woke and realized the ice had broken. The warehouse had served its purpose. After the trial, I'd revoked its legal designation as trust storage facility, and it stood empty except for Celestine's photograph and Isolde's painting mounted where Keaton had stood handcuffed. "Yellow looks like sunshine, Grandpa." Isolde held up a paint chip. "The warehouse needs sunshine." So we painted it on a March afternoon, when the temperature climbed above 50 degrees for the first time since November. Isolde wielded a small brush with more enthusiasm than precision, splattering yellow across her overalls and my work boots. "Grandpa, what was this warehouse for before?" I paused, considering how to answer. The truth was too complex. The simple answer felt more honest. To protect important things, and now to hold sunshine. She nodded satisfied, and returned to painting a section she could reach while standing on an overturned bucket. The structure that had represented my most sophisticated security engineering now represented choosing joy over control. The trap that caught criminals became a canvas for my granddaughter's vision of what healing looked like. Her laughter rang across the yard as paint dripped onto her hands. And I understood that sound was the clearest answer to why I'd fought so hard, not for money or justice, but for moments exactly like this one, where innocence could still exist beside the lake that had witnessed so much betrayal. That evening, Odessa appeared on my back porch, unannounced, carrying a thermos of tea and 2 cups. "I saw the yellow warehouse from the road," she said. "Isolde's idea, entirely hers." We sat in chairs that had become familiar over 6 months of legal consultations. But tonight, we didn't discuss evidence or depositions. We talked about Celestine, small memories, how she'd organize her herb garden by color rather than use, how she'd bought 2 of everything at estate sales because objects deserved companions. The Christmas she'd painted our bedroom ceiling with glow-in-the-dark stars. "She asked me one more thing," Odessa said finally as twilight settled. "Before she died. She asked me to ask you after everything settled if you needed a companion. Not a life partner, just someone to sit with you on the porch in evenings. I looked at Odessa in the fading light. 62 years old, widowed, 8 years trust and estate attorney, who'd spent 6 months helping me destroy my son-in-law and save my daughter. She thought of everything, I said. She loved you enough to prepare for this, for you winning but being alone, sitting on the porch with Odessa in comfortable silence. I understood that Celestine had planned not just for my survival or my victory, but for my loneliness, and she had loved me enough to arrange for someone to sit beside me in the quiet moments after everything fell apart and slowly reassembled itself into something different but still worth living. We stayed until the stars appeared, talking occasionally, silent more often, drinking tea that cooled as the night air turned crisp. When Odessa left, she squeezed my shoulder and said she'd bring better tea next time, and I understood that next time was already assumed. For the first time in 4 years, I would fall asleep not from exhaustion, but from peace. The next morning at 6:30, I sat in the same chair where this story began, drinking coffee and watching spring sunlight illuminate the yellow warehouse. The lake was calm, no fog, just clear water reflecting blue sky. I pulled Celestine's silver pocket watch from my pocket, returned from police evidence 3 months ago, still stopped at the moment she died. For 4 months, I'd carried it the same way I'd carried grief, keeping it close but hidden. This morning, I placed it on the table in front of me in direct sunlight. The watch sat there, not ticking, frozen at 2:17 p.m. But the morning continued around it. Birds called. The lake warmed. The yellow warehouse held light instead of evidence. I remembered her voice from our last coherent conversation. This watch is not broken, just waiting. The watch sitting in sunlight stopped at the exact moment Celestine died. But the morning continued around it. The lake warmed under spring sun. The yellow warehouse held light instead of evidence. And I realized that time doesn't fix what breaks, but it does teach you that broken things can still mark the moments that matter if you stop hiding them in your pocket and let them rest where sunlight reaches. Some things never really stop. They're just waiting until the right time to continue. Brielle would visit this afternoon with Isolde. They came twice a week now, slowly rebuilding what we'd fractured. We didn't talk about the warehouse arrest or the trial or Keaton serving 7 years in prison. We talked about Isolde's art class and Brielle's students and whether the dock needed repairs. Small conversations, patient rebuilding. The kind of healing that happens in moments too quiet to notice until you look back and realize the distance you've traveled. I sat in the same chair where this story began, drinking the same coffee at the same hour, but the man sitting there was not the same. Neither was the lake before me or the warehouse behind me or the family slowly knitting itself back together. Celestine's watch waited in the sunlight, not broken but patient, and I understood finally that the greatest security system I ever engineered was not the one that caught criminals, but the one my wife built to catch me when I fell, to hold me when I won too completely, and to ensure that after all the traps closed and all the sentences were served, I would still have reasons to wake at 6:30 and watch the sun rise over water that forgives everything winter does to it. That is all. That is enough. And to you listening to my story, remember this. I spent 6 months planning the perfect trap and caught everyone who betrayed me, but I almost lost what mattered most. This family story taught me that victory isn't just about being right. Don't make my mistake. I was so focused on revenge that I nearly forgot mercy. My wife Celestine knew better. She planned for redemption while I only planned for retribution. The lesson from this family story is simple. You can be right and still be wrong. These grandpa stories about betrayal and healing teach us that justice without mercy is just revenge with paperwork. I believe God allowed this struggle to show me that broken things can heal if you let sunlight reach them. The greatest security wasn't the trap I built to catch criminals, but the framework my wife built to ensure I wouldn't end up alone after winning too completely. That's wisdom I wish I'd understood sooner. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted? Share these grandpa stories with someone who might need to hear them. And if you enjoy real family stories about struggle and redemption, please subscribe to Dad's Revenge Stories. Your support helps me share more stories like this one. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than you know. One last reminder, some details in this story were adjusted for reflection and storytelling. What matters most is the lesson it carries, and I hope it stays with you.